Chapter 849. When Wu Qi unleashed his divine will, he sensed the wisp of Yuan Ling's soul in Wu Qi's divine will, and the 6 treasures obediently threw themselves into Wu Qi's arms. The Yuan Cave was the cave where Yuan Ling used to cultivate. It was a small cave dug by Yuan Ling himself, measuring only about a mile in both length and width. Inside, there was only an alchemy chamber, an artifact chamber, and a study room. After entering the Yuan Cave, there were 3 doors that led to 3 rooms. There was no bedroom for one to live in, nor was there a living room to entertain guests. Looking at the simple layout, Wu Qi could not help but sigh again. After leaving the artifact chamber, Wu Qi brought Xiangyu and Hu Hai into the study room, which was as messy as a garbage dump. With a gloomy face, Wu Qi looked at the messy pile of old papers in the study room and said to Xiangyu and Hu Hai with an embarrassed smile, "Well, in my previous life, he was a little slovenly." Grinning at the confused Hu Hai, Wu Qi said frankly, "Well, I've found that you have the potential to be my hired thug, so I'm going to improve your cultivation base and make you my hired thug." "Well, you said that you do not know how to govern the country, nor do you know how to manage the affairs of the imperial court. Apart from eating, drinking, and having fun, you can only be my hired thug. In fact, there is nothing wrong with being a hired thug. If you do a good job, I'll give the Qin state benefits." There were 180 round cauldrons in the alchemy chamber and 180 in the artifact chamber. These 360 cauldrons were the clones of Yuan Ling's heaven refining cauldron. When these cauldrons were combined into one, it would be the true form of the heaven refining cauldron, which possessed the mighty power to refine everything under the heaven. After a moment of silence, Wu Qi patted Hu Hai's head. The prison wagon that had trapped Hu Hai for over 2,000 years and was personally forged by him collapsed with a boom. Bewildered, Hu Hai staggered to the ground. "I find you a little interesting," said Wu Qi coolly. "You are much more interesting than your well-behaved elder brother, Fu Su. So, I'm prepared to groom you." Xiangyu followed quietly behind Wu Qi. Based on his character, since he had already acknowledged Wu Qi as his master, he would never change his mind. Hu Hai, on the other hand, looked left and right with a little curiosity and fear, and suddenly asked Wu Qi, "Prince Tun, why did you bring Hu Hai here?" He brought Xiangyu and Hu Hai into the elixir chamber. The chamber was originally only about an acre in size, but because of the restrictive spells laid out by Yuan Ling, the interior of the small chamber could expand almost infinitely. 180 huge purple cauldrons were erected in the alchemy chamber that was filled with purple smoke. Each of them was emanating a terrible fluctuation that almost knocked Xiangyu and Hu Hai unconscious. Wu Qi sighed softly. Then, the shouts of Yuan Qing and the others came from outside. In those days, Yuan Ling was either refining pills, crafting weapons, or writing down his experiences in refining pills and weapons in his study. The powerful body and soul of a chaotic fiend god made Yuan Ling not need to rest, eat, drink, or defecate. All his thoughts were immersed in refining pills and weapons, and he had nothing else to ask for. He didn't even understand why he worked so hard in refining pills and weapons, but he just did it. His face blushed slightly, and he put all the old papers into his sleeve. After that, he carefully picked up 2 gray jade slips from the stone table placed right in the middle of the study room, both of which had no luster or luster. The Book of Alchemy and Weapons were all Yuan Ling's painstaking efforts in refining pills and weapons. A gleam of madness flashed in Hu Hai's eyes. He nodded seriously, shook his hands, and wrapped the iron chains around his waist. Without looking at the prison wagon that had trapped him for more than 2,000 years, he followed behind Wu Qi with a straight face. But the grade of these pills was too high. Unless one had the cultivation base of a first-tier primordial immortal or above, one's body would explode and die immediately. These were the pills Yuan Ling had refined for himself. With his cultivation base, which was close to Dao fusing realm before his death, one could imagine the grade of these pills. Yuan Ling's clear energy could strengthen the soul and nourish the fleshly body. It was a very special kind of energy that accompanied Yuan Ling when he was born in the chaos. In the boundless chaotic world, only the Yuan Ling's nether realm had a spirit vein of Yuan Ling's clear energy, which could constantly extract chaotic energy and transform it into Yuan Ling's clear energy. This kind of energy was very beneficial to even chaotic fiend gods. If any cultivator could absorb and refine a part of Yuan Ling's clear energy, it would undoubtedly be a great fortune for them to be reborn. With his hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi grumbled as he walked. What kind of life did I have in my previous life? It's not bad to be a tyrant like Ao Buzan. There are many beautiful women among the chaotic fiend gods whose cultivation base is not high, but whose faces and figures are beautiful. DK, instead of watching them die in vain in battles, why don't I snatch them back and make them my concubines? The heaven-pacifying sword, the soul-splitting spear, the illusion-breaking halberd, the immovable lotus, the cardinal pagoda, and the one-heart seal were all refined by Yuan Ling by imitating the famous supreme treasures of primordial used by those chaotic fiend gods. Although, because of the materials used, they did not have the terrible power of the supreme treasures of primordial that could shatter even the heavenly Tao, they had reached the level of chaotic spirit treasures. Although they could not shatter the heavenly Tao, they could resist it. Looking at Tu Xiaobai and the others who had entered into a state of deep meditation, Wu Qi nodded. He struck out a few incantations around them, shielding them from the invasion of the extraterrestrial devils that might be attracted. After all, they were in the depths of the chaotic world, and heaven knew what strange things would pass by nearby. Even if there were countless restrictions set up by Yuan Ling to seal off this part of the void, there were countless strange existences in the chaotic world that could ignore the restrictions and come in and out at will. Even Yuan Ling had suffered a loss, so Wu Qi had no choice but to be careful. But, because these innate spiritual roots were too powerful, they had not been able to develop their own intelligence even after so many years in Yuan Ling's nether realm. If ordinary trees were planted in Yuan Ling's nether realm, after 3,000 to 5,000 years, they would be full of flower demons and tree monsters, but these innate spiritual roots could not develop intelligence and could not condense into a human form. In those years, Yuan Ling had a strange and eccentric personality. There were no animals in the vast Yuan Ling's nether realm, and all the plants were innate spiritual roots he found in the chaotic world. These innate spiritual roots had a deep foundation, and every flower and fruit they bore had the powerful effect of bringing the dead back to life, or making people ascend to immortality. These innate spiritual roots were also one of the sources of raw materials used by Yuan Ling to refine pills. With a sigh, he stored all the pills and cauldrons into his body, and Wu Qi went to the equipment room to put away the 180 cauldrons, as well as the 6 oddly shaped magical items in the equipment room. Magical items were different from pills. The pills refined by Yuan Ling could be thrown away at will, but if the magical items refined were not to his liking, they would be returned to the furnace and refined again. Therefore, for so many years, the magical items Yuan Ling was really satisfied with were these 6 magical items refined by him by imitating the supreme treasure of primordial, and each of them had the power of a chaotic spiritual treasure. There are too many monks and not enough gruel. Wu Qi rubbed his hands in annoyance. With so many subordinates, these 6 magical items were really not enough for him to share. Countless oddly shaped, crudely made pill bottles were floating messily in the pill room. Glowing lights shone from these pill bottles, and even though they were separated by the pill bottles, the pills inside them gave off a feeling of vitality and strength. Wu Qi's divine sense swept across these pills he refined in his previous life, and he couldn't help but grin. 50% of these pills were either poisons, knockout drugs, or some other strange and unpredictable drugs, while the other 50% were all kinds of medicines that were beneficial to humans. Looking at it now, it's really strange. How could I live in this place all by myself? TSK, a lonely old man squatting on such a huge planet. Every day he would either refine pills or forge weapons. For the sake of all kinds of rare materials, he even fought with those chaos demon gods until his head bled. Who knows how many enemies he had? This is strange. Why did he live so happily back then? Then he summoned the natural phenomena medallion and hung a thick layer of mist over everyone's head. They still need some time before they wake up, Wu Qi said to Xiangyu and Hu Hai with a smile. This Yuan Ling's energy is of great use to them. Originally, it would be a hindrance to let them break through to the realm of primordial with the help of virtues, but with Yuan Ling's energy to stabilize their foundation, there will be no hindrance when they break through again. After pondering for a while, Wu Qi decided on the whereabouts of these 6 magical items. Very few of the pills and magical items crafted by Yuan Ling were leaked to the outside world. Occasionally, when he was fighting for some rare materials and ran into some chaos fiend gods he could not defeat, he would exchange the finished pills and magical items with those chaos fiend gods. That was how some of his creations were circulated in the outside world. It was those few pills and magical items that made the old man Yuan Ling famous as the #1 chaos fiend god in alchemy and artifact crafting. How did he survive those endless years? Now, whenever Wu Qi thought of the days Yuan Ling lived, he could not help but have goosebumps all over his body. That was a character defect, wasn't it? It was definitely a sign of mental deficiency. Looking at the Yuan cave at the foot of a verdant cliff, Wu Qi sighed emotionally, then led Xiangyu and Hu Hai into it. When Tu Xiaobai, Yuan Qing, the demons, Luo Lu, and the other human cultivators were thrown out of Wu Qi's sleeve, they cried out in surprise, then immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and tried their best to deal with the Yuan Ling's energy in the outside world. The energy, which was at the same level as the chaotic energy, was carefully absorbed into their bodies and refined with their natal true flames. Wu Qi had a lot of resentment towards his former life, Yuan Ling. The old fellow was an extreme otaku, a technical otaku at that. He would never leave Yuan Ling's nether realm unless he ran out of materials for artifact crafting and pill concocting. He had no partner, no disciple, and apart from him, there was no other animal in the entire Yuan Ling's nether realm, not even a single plankton in the river. Among all these people, only Xiangyu and Hu Hai did not know what to do. Their cultivation bases and realms had not reached the level of the others, so they only felt that Yuan Ling's energy was refreshing and pleasant to the nose. Apart from that, they did not have any other feelings. Their bodies were still too far away from the Tao. The primordial spirit clear energy circulated in their bodies for a few rounds and then came out unscathed. They did not have the ability to absorb the primordial spirit clear energy. I have to find someone to pass down these 2 divine abilities. I can't be alone for the rest of my life. Chapter 850. Looking at the crowd standing in front of him, Wu Qi smiled warmly. Let's cut to the chase. The reason I've brought you out this time is to help you break through that threshold. Wu Qi said solemnly, to tell you the truth, Panga continent may fall into great chaos in the future, and so will outer heavenly realms. There will no longer be peace in this world. If we want to live and work in peace and contentment, and let our families and relatives live a good life, we will have to rely on you. Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed solemnly to the crowd. Lord Xianqing's father, the old Dragon King, who had been renamed Ao Guang, the Dragon King of the East Sea because of Wu Qi's prank, also bowed solemnly and said, there is no need to say that. Wu Qi, my little friend, we are now bound together for good or ill. No matter how great the storm is in the outside world, we will be in the same boat. The others nodded in agreement, especially Luo Hao, Luo Shui, Luo Ling, and Luo Yu. As Wu Qi's disciples, they would not have any objection. As for Goldhorn and Silverhorn, their saliva was already dripping all over the ground. Will there be great chaos? Chaos is good, the more chaotic, the better. Haha, when the world is in chaos, we can eat people and set fires. How wonderful! The eyes of the 2 brothers turned green. Even Goldfeather and Silverfeather, who were standing behind them, had a ferocious hunger in their eyes. Dragons were the best food for dragon pythons of fire and ice, but the 4 of them could not possibly eat the few dragons around Wu Qi, could they? Once Panga continent was in chaos, whether it was the Celestial Court, Buddhist League, or Diu, they would raise countless dragons as mounts, guardians, or providers of beast souls. When the war broke out, they would have as many dragons as they wanted. The soaring dragon pythons of fire and ice could only produce the strongest offspring by feeding on large amounts of dragons to provide them with nutrients. Truth be told, Goldhorn and Silverhorn were the kind of dragon pythons who were born malnourished. If Wu Qi had not given them a lot of benefits, they would never have been able to break through the realm of gold immortals, let alone step into the realm of primordial immortals. While the 4 dragon pythons were going all out, Yuan Qing's eyes were red with excitement. He waved his long rod and laughed wildly. Chaos is good, chaos is good. Master, if there is chaos, we can go beat people up, right? Now, our fellow disciples can't even take 3 strikes from Yuan Qing. Not satisfying, not satisfying. Giving Yuan Qing a distressed look, Wu Qi nodded and said, "You're right. If there is a war when the war breaks out, you will be the vanguard of the East Sea." Yuan Qing was dancing and laughing excitedly, but Wu Qi was a little hesitant. If Pangu continent was really in chaos, and the East Sea was really involved in it, if the East Sea was fighting on behalf of the Celestial Court, it was only natural for a monkey demon to be the vanguard. But if the army of the East Sea sent a monkey demon to fight on behalf of Diyu, would it attract the army of Diyu first? Shaking his head, Wu Qi was too lazy to pay attention to these trivial matters. When the war broke out, it was not up to outsiders to decide who he wanted to use. With a cold snort, Wu Qi fished out a pitch-black bodhisattva from under his sleeve and threw it to the ground. Then he reached into his sleeve again and threw out more pitch-black bodhisattvas. Pointing at these bodhisattvas from the nether realm, who were shrouded in karma and had their eyes burned red with the red lotus karmic fire, Wu Qi said coolly, 2 for each of you. Kill them and you will be rewarded with virtues. Well, come one by one and absorb the virtues. With the evil karma they have created, it will be enough for you to break through the realm of primordial. When the time comes, with so many primordial experts guarding the East Sea, even if the army of the Celestial Court comes to attack us, we will be confident. Apart from Xiangyu, the others present could not help but gasp when they saw the black bodhisattvas thrown out by Wu Qi. Qing Xia and Bai Wu, Patriarch Jiang Yun's companions, widened their eyes in astonishment and cried out, "Are these bodhisattvas from the Buddhist League? How did they become like this?" Wu Qi briefly introduced the origin of these bodhisattvas, and also explained why they had become like this. When the crowd heard that Wu Qi had gone straight into the nether realm and killed all the bodhisattvas and arhats from the nether realm, their faces turned extremely interesting. Did this mean that he had become the sworn enemy of the Buddhist League? But when they thought about what Wu Qi had done in the past, he had killed 3 Buddhas and robbed Buddha Futu, so killing a few bodhisattvas was nothing to them. Clearing his throat, Luo Lu, the head of Luo clan, took a careful step forward. Although his 3 granddaughters were Wu Qi's disciples, the seniority between him and Wu Qi was not the same. He bowed respectfully to Wu Qi and said, using the title of a disciple of the underhand sect, "Sect leader, why don't I be the pathfinder?" Wu Qi nodded, waved his hand, and said with a smile, "You can do it one by one. You can give it a try first. Although this is the depths of the chaotic world, as long as you are born in Pangu world, you cannot escape the surveillance of the heavenly Tao of that world. By killing these bodhisattvas, you will be rewarded with virtues, and as long as you can step into the realm of primordial, you will face the heavenly tribulation." After calculating with his fingers for a while, Wu Qi smiled and said, "Since you have stepped into the Tao with virtues, the power of the heavenly tribulation will not be too strong. I will also share a part of the heavenly tribulation's power with you. Just focus on comprehending the enlightenment of the heavenly Tao when you break through the realm of primordial." Luo Lu answered respectfully. Carrying the 2 bodhisattvas who could not move and could only roll their eyes, he strode a mile away, then unleashed his flying swords to cut open the 2 bodhisattvas' foreheads, shattering their natal relics and a wisp of their true spirits. With his cultivation base of a peak-level gold immortal, Luo Lu was much stronger than the 2 bodhisattvas. On top of that, the 2 bodhisattvas were powerless to resist, so Luo Lu killed them easily. After killing the 2 bodhisattvas, a melodious heavenly tune was heard coming from all directions, and wisps of purple mist began to gather above Yuan Ling's nether realm. Before long, dense yellow mist poured down from the purple clouds like a heavy rain, fusing into Luo Li's body. Driven by the enormous virtues, Luo Li's divine soul grew rapidly, and before long, a golden halo of virtues emerged behind his head. The crowd's vision blurred, and in the next moment, Luo Li's body seemed to have fused with the surrounding void, while a vast bright light radiated from his body. Those who were illuminated by the bright light felt a sense of clarity in their hearts, as if their intelligence had been greatly enhanced. When they looked around, they found that the world was so clear, as if every leaf and every blade of grass contained infinite mysteries. When the heavenly tribulation came, Wu Qi had shared 90% of its power with Luolu, allowing him to smoothly break through to the realm of primordial. Wu Qi asked him to go aside and absorb Yuan Ling's energy to stabilize his cultivation base, then asked Luo how to continue with the same process. One after another, the people brought here by Wu Qi stepped into the realm of Tao by virtue of virtues. Everything went smoothly for those who came before him, but when the last one, Yuan Qing, was about to break through, he suddenly sensed an unusual sign. Suddenly, a fragrant aroma wafted out from Yuan Qing, who had transformed into a 1,000-feet-tall ape with golden fur, wielding an iron staff and striking at the lightning tribulation. Hundreds of pink, delicate petals with dew on them drifted out soundlessly from Yuan Qing's side. Suddenly, his eyes turned scarlet, filled with a strong blood-red hue, and no longer had any spirituality in them. Slowly, he turned to look at Wu Qi and let out a strange, deep laugh. Interesting, this is very interesting. I can't believe someone is transcending a heavenly tribulation of this level in the chaos. Is he a man who defies the heavenly Tao of his own world? Wu Qi's expression flickered. With a shake of his hand, he unleashed a beam of Buddhist light toward Yuan Qing. A muffled rumble echoed out as a beam of clear and bright light shot out of Yuan Qing's mouth, colliding head-on with the beam unleashed by Wu Qi. Yuan Qing staggered back a few steps, and most of the blood-red hue in his eyes suddenly faded away. The deep voice rang out, and then suddenly became infinitely tender. Why are you so cruel and merciless as to kill me as soon as we meet? Don't worry, I'll deal with you when I'm here, little boy. Hee, after wandering here for countless years, this is the first time I've met such interesting creatures like you. Luo Lu and the others rose to their feet and asked in shock, "Who is this demon? How dare he do this?" Wu Qi gave a cold laugh, shook his head and said, "He is not a demon, but an invisible fiend born in the chaos. He comes and goes without a trace, and he is the ancestor of the so-called heavenly fiends. Look at how easily he has invaded Yuan Ling's nether realm. I'm no match for him now." Chi-Chi's expression flickered, while Wu Qi waved his sleeve and sent everyone into it, then reached out to grab Yuan Qing. Before Yuan Qing could react, a small glinting seal shot out of Wu Qi's fingertip and smashed into Yuan Qing's forehead, knocking him out. The seal was the single heart seal crafted by Wu Qi in his previous life, and it had many magical uses. Even though Yuan Qing had stepped into the realm of primordial, he was still knocked out by the seal. Grabbing Yuan Qing, Wu Qi stamped his foot and was about to put Yuan Ling's nether realm into his interstitial space. But, before Wu Qi could do that, a sheet of colorful light had appeared behind Wu Qi silently. Two snow-white hands reached out of the light and slapped toward Wu Qi's back amidst a melodious melody. The two hands were bone-piercingly cold, bringing with them a terrible chill that made Wu Qi's scalp go numb. If he was hit in the back, Wu Qi had no doubt that the yang in his kidneys would be shattered and frozen into ice cubes. With a furious roar, Wu Qi flicked his sleeve, and all the bodhisattvas and arhats he had taken from the nether realm flew out of his sleeve. Kitagarbha was also thrown out by Wu Qi, and a third of his mighty and boundless magic power was returned to him by Wu Qi. With a flash, Wu Qi transformed into a pitch-black arhat and slipped into the crowd of hundreds of bodhisattvas and 108,000 arhats. Then he pressed his palm on Yuan Ling's nether realm and put it into his interstitial space. As soon as he put the lair of his previous life into his body, he heard dozens of miserable howls ringing out. The ray of light rushed into the crowd of monks and threw out its palms in all directions. Caught off guard, 3 bodhisattvas and 97 arhats were slapped on their waists. The yang in their kidneys was sucked dry, and their bodies were frozen into ice cubes. Wu Qi had hidden his aura, so the ray of light could not find Wu Qi for a while. "Interesting little fella," he said in surprise. "Your technique of hiding aura is very good. But you can't escape from me no matter how hard you try." Wu Qi narrowed his eyes. His body suddenly turned into a wisp of chaotic energy and drifted toward the outside world. If he had turned into chaotic energy and fled at any other time, the ray of light would have found him. But now that Wu Qi had thrown out Kitagarbha and unlocked the restrictive spell on him, a loud roar suddenly rang out. How dare you hurt a disciple of the Buddhist League? The Buddhist League is vast, and the sea of Dharma is boundless. Infinite transmigration formation, arise. A loud rumble rang out, and the chaotic airflows in the surroundings became extremely chaotic. This was not the nether realm, so they could not borrow the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. But these monks had formed a formation, and by relying on their own Buddhist power, they had simulated a small 6 paths of reincarnation in the void. An enormous force restrained the ray of light, and Wu Qi took the opportunity to leave. Chapter 851. Suddenly, a large hole thousands of miles in diameter was torn open in the boundless wall of chaotic energy, and Wu Qi shot out of it like a bolt of lightning. He used all his divine abilities to break through the void and flew toward Pangu continent at the expense of overdrawing his energy. Even with Wu Qi's cultivation base of 8th tier primordial immortal and his attainment in the realm of Tao breaking, it only took him 20 days to return to Pangu continent with a mouthful of blood. When he landed heavily on the top of a mountain outside in He City, Wu Qi flung the people out of his sleeve and pressed his palm on Yuan Qing's head, whose eyes were still a little red. Buddhist energy flowed into his body, expelling the remaining fiend energy in his brain. Looking at the uneasy crowd, Wu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "It's all right, we've gotten rid of that fiend for now. Well, a scapegoat has helped us stop him. I don't know how long we can hold him back, but I don't think he can come here." Pangu continent was now the focus of the struggle between the Celestial Court, the Buddhist League, and Yu. If an invisible fiend in the chaos invaded Pangu continent and stirred up trouble, he would most likely be attacked by the joint forces of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. So, there was no need to worry that he would bring more trouble to Wu Qi. With a long sigh, Wu Qi counted his gains. There was no doubt that Yuan Ling's nether realm would bring great benefits to Wu Qi and the people around him. After teaching his disciples, the Underhand sect and the East Sea's medicinal pills and magical artifacts would rank first in the world. On the other hand, the 6 chaotic spirit artifacts would not bring a fundamental change to the East Sea's overall strength, for there were too few of them. As for those medicinal pills, Wu Qi was confident that he would not die of overeating after taking them, but the others, including Princess Zhonglu, should not take them recklessly. After a brief moment of contemplation, Wu Qi asked Qing Xia, Bai Wu, Qing Yi and Qing Xin, the 4 old immortals, to bring everyone back to the East Sea, while he brought Xiang Yu and Hu Hai and flew towards Anhe City. Riding on a cloud and drifting in the sky, Wu Qi smiled helplessly at Xiang Yu and Hu Hai and said, "I was planning to improve your cultivation base as well, but that fiend has ruined my plan. Well, there is a place suitable for you to cultivate. Are you willing to spend some time there?" Xiang Yu and Hu Hai exchanged a look and nodded at the same time. Wu Qi opened his mouth and swallowed the 2 of them. He directly stuffed them into Yuan Ling's nether realm. The mysterious Yin Celestial Tower also appeared above Yuan Ling's nether realm. Wu Qi tried his best to increase the flow of time in Yuan Ling's nether realm to 2,000 times the limit that he could bear. At the same time, he sent a few blood-draining fiends to Xiang Yu and Hu Hai, teaching them the Blood Sea Grand Magic and the Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture. Since Xiang Yu was cultivating the Qiyu Fiend technique and the Blood Sea Grand Magic at the same time, he might be able to cultivate the true form of the Blood Sea Fiend God, which was immortal and indestructible. As for Hu Hai, he was cultivating the minor constellation forbidden technique of the Fiend technique, and now that he was focusing on cultivating the Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture, he would definitely have a great achievement in the future. Currently, Wu Qi had immortals, demon immortals, longbow men, and heavenly ghosts under his command. He only lacked fiends and monks. I'll have to find a way to add a Buddhist branch to the Underhand sect when the opportunity arises. But which disciple would be willing to be a monk? Am I going to look for a few disciples who have lost their families and lost all hope in the future? With some unpleasant thoughts flashing in his mind, Wu Qi came to Anhe City with a strange smile on his face. Inside the city, the emperors and courtiers of the 6 states were drinking and feasting. It had been nearly a year since Wu Qi left with his men, and the treaty between the 6 states and the East Sea had been officially drawn up. But without Wu Qi, no one had the right to sign it. Over the past few months, Du had tightened the checks on the immortals and itinerant cultivators from all over the world. Even the secret palace's revered elders had begun to roam Pangu continent, and Gao had led Yu Xiong army to wipe out hundreds of immortal gathering points that had survived the chaos caused by myriad immortal alliance. Under such circumstances, except for Great Yen, the other 5 states dared not to act recklessly. So, the emperors and courtiers of the 6 states simply gathered in Anhe City and spent their days drinking and enjoying themselves. The 6 states had shrunk their forces and put on the facade of good people, which had allowed them to avoid the checks of Du's officers and soldiers several times. During the few months that Wu Qi was away, the old rivals of the 6 states had gathered together and gotten along quite well. Originally, they were all heroes and ambitious people. Their personalities and methods greatly complemented each other. After Wu Qi's domineering appearance had strangled the possible conflict between the 6 states, the emperors and courtiers of the 6 states, knowing that they would be staunch allies in the future, intended to build a good relationship with each other, and even felt like a big family. Anyway, when Wu Qi walked into the city lord mansion in Anhe City, he saw his sworn enemies, Bai Qi and Lian Pe, drinking together with their arms around each other's shoulders, Su Qin and Zhang Yi, sipping on the long legs of a dancer, Giga Zi and Sun Kuang, talking and laughing with wine jars in their arms, and Ying Zheng, the first emperor of Qin, holding Gao Jianli's hand and singing together. The bizarre scene stunned Wu Qi for a long time. When he saw the heroes of the 6 states almost fighting with each other, Wu Qi could not help but grumble inwardly, "If you could behave like this in the past, perhaps you would have long swept across the entire world." However, on second thought, Wu Qi felt fortunate that the emperors and courtiers of the 6 states on Earth did not behave like this, or else they would have long been wiped out by the monitoring force of the Buddhist League. After a moment of hesitation, Wu Qi stood at the entrance of the hall and laughed aloud. "Your Majesties and courtiers, I'm back. We'll have to find a good and auspicious day to officially sign the treaty, and then we'll have to find a good and auspicious day to break the black celestial forbidden curse on you." A sudden silence fell over the hall, as everyone turned to look at him at the same time. Lu Chengfeng was the first to rise to his feet. He handed Wu Qi a book made of gold sheets, which contained the detailed provisions of the treaty he had drawn up with the 6 states on behalf of the East Sea Alliance. In the treaty, the East Sea Alliance would have the absolute leadership. The 6 states would retain a small part of their independence, while the rest of the military, administrative, financial, and livelihood of the people would belong to the East Sea Alliance, which was led by Wu Qi. Yan Dan, Ying Zheng, and the other emperors of the 6 states would be the elders of the East Sea Alliance, and together with the elders selected by the East Sea Alliance, they would supervise the state affairs of the East Sea Alliance. On the other hand, the civil and military officials of the 6 states would also be the ministers of the East Sea Alliance, and would contribute their knowledge and military force to the development and growth of the East Sea Alliance. When Lu Chengfeng handed the Golden Book to Wu Qi, the emperors and ministers of the 6 states, including Yan Dan, bowed deeply to Wu Qi at the same time and said, "Greetings, King of the East Sea Alliance." Wu Qi handed the Golden Book to Lu Chengfeng, then returned the greeting to the people and said solemnly, "Your Majesties and ministers, you're being too polite. We are people of the same origin, and we come from the same place. When the world is plunged into chaos in the future, we need to support each other." All the heroes in the hall answered at the same time. When they saw that Wu Qi was so humble and courteous despite his cultivation base, they could not help but feel relieved. Although the 6 states had no choice but to join the East Sea Alliance due to the current situation, none of them wanted to have a tyrannical and arrogant master standing above them. Therefore, they were very satisfied that Wu Qi could be so respectful and courteous. Wu Qi glanced at the people, nodding and smiling at them in a friendly manner. Especially those who had conflicts with Qin in the past, such as Su Fu, who was stripped naked by Wu Qi with a drunken dragon. Wu Qi had a very bright smile on his face. He felt that he had wronged them back in Meng Mountains, and it looked like he would have to compensate them more now. With a flip of his palm, a jade slip appeared in Wu Qi's hand. He smiled at Su Fu and said, "Old Mr. Su Fu, this is the book of ancient god that I found by accident. I know old Mr. is an expert in the art of ancient talismans, so I think it's the most suitable thing to give to you." Su Fu was taken aback. Then he rolled up his sleeves and sprung to his feet, pointing his finger at Wu Qi as he cried out, "It was you who kidnapped me from the camp years ago?" All the heroes in the hall burst into wild laughter. Amidst the laughter, Su Fu grabbed the jade slip sulkily and sent his divine will into it. Immediately, his body trembled, and he could no longer struggle out of the vast and mysterious ancient talismans. Compared to the Book of Ancient Gods, Su Fu's primordial rune inheritance was like comparing a firefly to the sun. There was no comparison at all. Everyone in the hall saw the change in Su Fu's expression, and they immediately realized that Wu Qi had given Su Fu an incredible cultivation technique. Their eyes lit up immediately. After a moment of pondering, Wu Qi produced dozens of jade slips, engraving all the cultivation techniques he had learned to the peak realm of Gold Immortal into these jade slips, then distributed them to the emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties. Whether it was the innate pure yang universal scripture, the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, the Song of Gale, the Dark Een Water scripture, or other cultivation techniques, the cultivation techniques Wu Qi had obtained were extremely exquisite. With these techniques and Wu Qi's meticulous cultivation, the future of the emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties was obvious. The emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties were men who knew what was good and what was bad. Originally, the cultivation techniques they obtained could only allow them to cultivate to the realm of Heaven Immortal, which was nothing compared to the cultivation techniques Wu Qi had given them. The fact that Wu Qi had so generously given so many cultivation techniques to them meant that he owed them a great debt. For a moment, even the most proud and arrogant among the emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties bowed deeply to Wu Qi, and their impression of Wu Qi had deepened. Wu Qi hurriedly returned the bow, while Lu Chengfeng had already summoned the maids and servants to replace all the dishes and wine. After that, Wu Qi and the others took their seats and resumed the banquet. The great hall was bustling with noise and excitement, and the emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties rose to their feet to toast Wu Qi. Wu Qi did not refuse any of them, and just enjoyed the banquet with the crowd. While the people of Anhui City were having a great time, somewhere in a very remote place on Pangu continent, a fair and tender little hand suddenly tore the void open. A ball of light silently flew out of it with a few figures in it. Kitsigarba, who was shrouded in the black smoke of retribution fire, stood behind the mass of light with an expressionless face. "This is Pangu continent, the place where the man who fled a few days ago came from," he said in a flat voice. "Senior, may I ask if we can leave now?" The voice in the mass of light suddenly laughed strangely. "How is that possible? I happen to be short of a group of people to run errands for me. With so many of you, you can be my subordinates. Don't tell me that this is how you repay me for helping you bald donkeys resolve the karmic fire in your bodies?" The voice snorted coldly and said in a deep voice, "Run 36 eons for me, and I'll give you back your freedom. If you don't obey me, I'll break your bald heads. You don't like it? Come and beat me if you don't like it. According to the rules of the chaos, whoever has the bigger fist is the boss. Why don't you come and beat me? If you win, it's my duty to run errands for you." Kitsigarba opened his mouth and could not come to his senses for a long time. The group of bodhisattvas behind him trembled with anger, but at the thought of the terrible strength of the mass of light, they finally bowed their heads in frustration. Looking at the boundless Pangu continent, the mass of light suddenly sighed with joy and said, "What a wonderful place! It's mine now." Chapter 852. The 9th day of the 9th month was a good and auspicious day. It was the auspicious day chosen by Princess Zhang Lu with the art of divination. Deep in the mountains 5,000 miles south of Anhui City, an altar made of yellow soil stood 1,000 feet tall, with a base measuring 2,000 feet in both width and length. It was surrounded by the emperors and courtiers of the six dynasties, as well as the members of the imperial clan and powerful clans. A row of 36 storage bracelets with huge capacities was placed on the altar. Clad in a black ceremonial robe, Princess Zhongli stood on the top of the altar, looking calmly at the drifting clouds in the sky. Beneath the altar, Wu Qi and the emperors and courtiers of the six dynasties were cutting their wrists and bleeding, using their own blood to sign a treaty of alliance made of yellow silk. When they signed their names, each of them swore that they would do their best to safeguard the overall interests of the East Sea Alliance. The overall interests included the interests of everyone in the six dynasties, and naturally, the interests of the East Sea that Wu Qi represented. After signing the treaty, the soldiers and civilians of the six dynasties would be able to move into Wu Qi's territory, and from then on, no one in DU would be able to discover the invasion of the six dynasties. With the 30 provinces under Wu Qi's direct jurisdiction and the 300 provinces under Wu Qi's control, even if the population of the six dynasties were increased by 10,000 times, it would be like throwing a stone into the ocean, and no one would notice anything amiss, let alone the small population of the six dynasties. In a devout and solemn atmosphere, Wu Qi and the emperors of the six dynasties prayed to the heaven and earth, and officially signed the Treaty of Alliance. Also, the Emperor of Great Yen, Yen Dan, announced his abdication and handed the throne to his granddaughter, Princess Zhongli. From now on, Princess Zhongli had another official title, Empress Zhongli Jizishuan. But she did not like the name, so those close to her still called her Princess Zhongli. When the Treaty of Alliance was signed, Wu Qi and the emperors of the six dynasties retreated to the rear of the army, while teams of elite soldiers transported a large number of livestock and immortals and cultivators they had secretly captured from the East Sea to the altar. With a soft cry from Princess Zhongli, these livestock and immortals were slaughtered. Their blood sprayed all over the ground, turning into a dense mist that rose thousands of feet into the air. Princess Zhongli recited an incantation and called out Lao Ai's name. Immediately, a faint pressure came pressing down from the sky. Wu Qi gently flicked his fingers a few times under his sleeve, and the hundreds of thousands of soldiers of Dong Hai carefully hid themselves on the hundreds of mountains thousands of miles away from the valley. Holding Kunwu swords manifested from Wu Qi's chaotic energy, 1,080 captains of the army formed a massive fiend-slaying sword formation with hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Outside the formation, dozens of primordial experts of the East Sea, including Ao Buzan, Lord Xianxing, and thousands of gold immortals, had formed a Yuanling formation to conceal their auras. The Great Formation was the work of Lord Yuanling. Although it did not have much offensive power, when it came to concealing one's presence, it was the best in the universe. In those years, whenever Yuanling found some immature supreme-grade herbs in the chaos, he would use this Yuanling formation to conceal their auras, and only pick them when they were ripe. The fact that the formation could fool the eyes and ears of countless ancient chaos fiends showed how effective it was in concealing auras. With his hands tucked under his sleeves, Wu Qi looked with a smile at the dark circle of light that was slowly appearing over the altar. If Hei Mo dutifully lifted the restrictive spell on the members of the imperial clan and the aristocratic clans of the six states, and vowed never to leak the news, then everything would be fine. He could just take the natural treasures he was supposed to take and leave. If he dared to play any tricks, Wu Qi would not care how strong he was. He had already prepared a backup plan to force Lao Ai to stay, no matter how strong his cultivation base was. Although the Black Celestial Forbidden Curse was bizarre and profound, with Lord Yuanling's knowledge, he felt that as long as his cultivation base broke through the realm of first-tier primordial immortal, he would be able to lift it. It was only to appease the emperors and courtiers of the six states and make them feel more of a sense of belonging to the East Sea Alliance that Wu Qi was willing to pay a huge price to have Hei Mo lift the curse for the people of the six states. Otherwise, he would rather use the enormous amount of natural treasures to craft artifacts than give them to Hei Mo accompanied by a strange laugh. A plume of black smoke rushed out of the circle of light. With a ferocious and bizarre face, Hei Mo emerged from the smoke, blinking his eyes as he glanced around. Suddenly, he clapped his hands and burst into laughter. "Have you prepared enough offerings?" Tiske, so many people are under the control of the curse? Yes, it is. You sure are fast in giving birth. Your Excellency, please lift the black celestial forbidden curse for them, said Princess Zhang coolly. Heimo pondered for a moment, then waved his hand casually. 36 storage bracelets with huge capacities fell into his hand. As he scanned the bracelets with his divine sense, he gasped and cried out in alarm, "Have you robbed human Emperor de Yu's treasure vault? You've really gathered so many treasures?" His eyes darting quickly, Heimo fiddled with the bracelets and did not say a word for a long while. Slowly, Wu Qi flew up into the sky and landed next to Princess Zhanglu, giving Heimo a faint smile. "Senior Heimo, we've prepared everything according to your request. The people who need you to lift the curse are all here. Look, count carefully. According to the price you offered back then, there are so many of us here, and we've paid enough for everyone." A huge spatial restrictive spell was deployed in the valley, where all the members of the imperial clans and the descendants of the powerful clans of the 6 dynasties were gathered. Over 2,000 years ago, when the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties went to Myriad Immortals' planet, there were only about 100 of them. Now, they were living and multiplying. Over the past 2,000 years, they had given birth to nearly 100 generations of descendants. Excluding those who did not have the aptitude to cultivate, those who died of old age, and those who died of accidents, the number of members of the imperial clans and descendants of the powerful clans of the 6 dynasties now numbered in the millions. Adding up the members of the imperial clans of the 6 dynasties and the descendants of the hundreds of powerful clans, the total population was nearly 100 million. Wu Qi did not want to complicate matters, so he had prepared enough materials according to the population of the 6 dynasties, which was exactly in line with the sky-high price that Heimo had quoted to Wu Qi. Wu Qi thought he had done all he could, and Heimo should not have any other excuses. Heimo's eyes darted from side to side. Stroking the storage bracelet on his wrist, he suddenly sighed and said, "I didn't expect you to be so determined. Even if this is Panga continent, it's not easy for you to collect so many natural treasures, is it?" The tut made Wu Qi's heart burn with anger. "The what?" he said with a cold grin. Heimo was startled by the sudden fierce aura that emerged from Wu Qi. He pondered for a moment, his eyes darting quickly, but he still said, "But there have been some changes recently." He blinked a few times, then laughed strangely and said, "A few huge mineral veins have been discovered in my world recently, and the value of these things has shrunk. If you want me to undo the restrictive spells on so many people, well..." Heimo weighed the bracelet in his hand and said with a frown, "Since you're so sincere, I'll double the amount of materials. Although the value of these things has been reduced by more than half in my world, since you're so sincere, I'll double the amount. As for the rest, I'll give you a discount." Princess Zhanglu did not say a word, and neither did Wu Qi for a long time. The members of the imperial clan and the aristocratic clans of the 6 dynasties looked up at Heimo at the same time with unfriendly eyes. With so many people staring at him, even though he was proud of his amazing cultivation base and did not take Wu Qi and the others seriously, he could not help but feel a little creeped out. "Don't think of any dirty tricks. I can come and go as I please. What can you do to me?" he said. Wu Qi snorted coldly and slowly unleashed his aura of the realm of primordial. The aura of an 8th-tier primordial expert caused Heimo's face to flicker abruptly. Reflexively, he flew back hundreds of feet. Then, a blood-red cloud rushed out of the top of Wu Qi's head, from which 18 blood-draining celestial fiends flew out of Wu Qi's head with strange laughter, each emanating the pressure of a 9th-tier primordial expert. Heimo's face twitched at the sight of the 18 bizarre fiends, and he said subconsciously, "Well, in that case, just give me another 50%, no, 30% of the materials." Wu Qi snorted coldly and waved his hand. 1,080 beams of green light shot into the sky as Chi-Chi activated the fiend-slaying sword formation. Countless soldiers of the East Sea plunged into the formation. Strengthened by the formation, the soldiers of the East Sea shone with a threatening golden light as they roared in unison and unleashed a terrible aura that pressed down on Heimo's face fell instantly. "The fiend-slaying sword formation? You've actually obtained the legacy of the human sacred emperor? Why do you have to do this? I must have remembered wrongly. Although the mineral veins in our world are huge, they happen to lack the materials in your bracelet. You and I are good friends, so why do you have to fight and kill each other? Well, how about I lift the curse for you now? Two figures flickered in the void. Holding the soul-splitting spear and the illusion-breaking halberd respectively, Ao Buzan and Lord Xianxing made their moves. Ao Buzan fiddled with the soul-splitting spear, which was pitch black and shrouded in a faint purple mist, and said with a strange laugh, "Boy, why don't you let me stab you?" He was in a very good mood when he finally got a spear that suited his wicked taste. Lord Xianxing, on the other hand, waved the illusion-breaking halberd and tore a very thin, arc-shaped crack in the void. The crack lasted for a full 10 minutes without dissipating, which made He Mo's face turn even more unsightly. He gave the divine weapons in Ao Buzan's and Lord Xianxing's hands a deep look, then heaved a long sigh and said, "A chaotic spirit artifact? Hee, I've suffered a great loss this time." Wu Qi looked at He Mo calmly and said in a flat voice, "Swear that you will not reveal anything that happened today, and you are not allowed to use any hints or metaphors to reveal what happened here. I'll let you go, and you can take everything you have with you." He Mo gritted his teeth and said with a cold grin, "I've suffered a great loss today. I didn't expect you to have such means and fortune. If you want me to obediently swear, you have to take out enough bargaining chips. If you can really intimidate me, not only will I obediently swear, but I will also accept your offerings in the future." Wu Qi pondered for a moment, then gave Princess Zhonglu a look. A lotus throne shrouded in bright light spiraled out from under Princess Zhongli's feet. It was the immovable spirit artifact crafted by Wu Qi in his previous life. As it had fused with the innate silver lotus, it was extremely strong in both offense and defense. A stream of auspicious mist rose from the top of her head, and a small 9-storied pagoda slowly emerged. It was the fundamental pagoda, which could be used to protect and nourish one's foundation. When the two chaotic spirit artifacts appeared, He Mo's face was so bitter that it could almost ooze out bile. He heaved a long sigh and raised both hands to swear his natal fiend god oath. Then he waved his hand. Accompanied by a shrill ghost howl, plumes of black smoke rushed out of the heads of the emperors and courtiers of the 6 dynasties, as well as the descendants of the aristocratic clans, and quickly entered his body. Chi-Chi of the 6 dynasties had manifested his nascent divinities, which were now clean and free of any foreign substance. For a moment, the valley was filled with thunderous cheers, and there were even some descendants of the imperial clan and aristocratic clans shouting, "Long live the king of East Sea." Wu Qi laughed heartily as he stood on the altar and looked down at the people of the 6 dynasties. Chapter 853. Even wise men like Gigazi and Sun Kuang were thrilled that the restrictive spell that had troubled them for more than 2,000 years had been lifted. How could heroes like them tolerate having their lives and destinies controlled by others? Even if they could live, they would be no different from puppets. Wu Qi had spent a huge sum of money to lift the restrictive spell, which was no different from giving them a second life, freedom, and dignity. Coupled with the cultivation techniques that Wu Qi had given them, the people of the 6 dynasties finally had a true sense of belonging to the East Sea Alliance. Just as Ying Zheng had said after the sacrificial ceremony, "Are those sacred immortals and Buddhas really that great? Do they really think we are just ants? Let us do what we want, and let those high and mighty people understand that we, the common people, are not to be bullied." Of course, it was a little funny for the Emperor of Deqin to call himself the common people, but Ying Zheng's words had won everyone's cheers. The feast lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The people of the 6 dynasties enjoyed themselves to the fullest, venting the stress and grievances that had accumulated in their hearts for so many years. In the past 3 days and 3 nights, countless women in Anlu County had fallen in love with some young, handsome, and wealthy men of unknown origins. At Wu Qi's request, these girls were brought back to their homes by those young men. A few months later, the imperial clans and clans of the six dynasties ushered in a fertility boom, and the total population of the clans and clans nearly doubled. What could Wu Qi say in the face of such an absurd thing? Even his father-in-law, Yan Qijuan, had fooled around with a few daughters of wealthy merchants in Anhui city with Fu Su, the crown prince of Deqin, giving Wu Qi a few mistresses. What else could he say? After the 3-day feast, Wu Qi led the army of the East Sea back to the East Sea city. Meanwhile, Princess and Lu and those primordial immortals around Wu Qi cooperated with the people of the six dynasties in relocating their people. After stepping into the realm of primordial, Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others had formed their own interstitial worlds. No matter how many people there were in the six dynasties, they could easily bring them to the provinces under the East Sea and settle them down. Currently, Di was still migrating to the prefectures under his rule in the East Sea. There were trillions of people migrating from all over the world. How many people could there be in the six kingdoms? Without anyone noticing, he had made the arrangements. The various provinces of Di were vast, and the distance between each province was several million miles. As long as Wu Qi, the prince in charge, did not investigate thoroughly, who would know that there was such a group of people in the East Sea? In high spirits, Wu Qi and the others boarded a flying ship and flew back to Donghai City. The army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers used hundreds of flying ships of various sizes. Along the way, the formation of the ships cast a large shadow on the ground, blotting out the sky and covering the earth like a dark cloud. Wherever the ships passed, the people under the rule of the East Sea bowed and saluted. Wu Qi felt very happy. When he returned to the East Sea this time, he would make good use of the cave abode Emperor Haozuan had opened for him and train a group of elites. With dozens of primordial experts guarding the East Sea, a large number of elite soldiers in battle formations, and the help of the heroes of the six dynasties, Wu Qi felt that even if something terrible happened to Pangu continent in the future, he would have the power to protect himself. Compared with Yuan Ling in his previous life, Wu Qi must live a good and comfortable life in this life. If anyone dared to touch even a single strand of hair on the people around him, he would definitely exterminate their entire family. What happened to Tan Lang and Lu Xiaobai must never happen again. The Green City on Earth had been completely destroyed, and the one in outer heavenly realms had been sentenced to death by Wu Qi. But the situation was delicate now, and Wu Qi was not willing to rush into outer heavenly realms and wipe out the entire Green City. He was waiting for an opportunity when he could wipe out the entire Green City without worrying about any consequences. As the flying ships approached the East Sea City, at Wu Qi's command, the huge army gradually dispersed, flying ships in groups of 3 to 5 getting ready to land in their respective barracks. With the East Sea City as the center, the army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers was stationed in counties that were more than 10,000 miles wide. Outside each county city was a corresponding barracks, and the locations of these barracks were the nodes of a formation. The flying ship Wu Qi and the others slowly flew over the East Sea City. Then, Wu Qi was surprised to find that in the square in front of his mansion, the king of East Sea, a luxurious chariot was blocking the entrance to his mansion. Thousands of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in golden armor were lined up in front of the gate, and in front of the formation, a dozen naked men were being whipped. With his keen eyes, Wu Qi glanced in that direction, and his face turned as dark as the sky before a summer thunderstorm. 19 pillars, shining with a golden light and made of neither gold nor iron, stood in front of the king of East Sea's mansion. Huang Liang and the other 19 generals were glued to the pillars, their necks, wrists, waists, and ankles tightly fastened to the pillars by 6 golden rings, unable to move at all. Their clothes were stripped off, and in front of each of them were 2 tall and strong golden-armored heavenly generals, holding dragon-hide whips and lashing them fiercely. Obviously, the whips were enchanted with immortal magic. Huang Liang and his 18 deputies were all peak-level 2nd Panga Heaven cultivators, and their fleshly bodies were incomparably strong, many times stronger than diamonds. But the whips easily tore their skin and flesh apart, and each lash left deep wounds on their bodies. Huang Liang and the others widened their eyes in pain and roared at the top of their lungs, but they could not make a single sound. Not only that, Huang Liang and the others had achieved success in cultivating the true body of heaven and earth scripture, and their control of every muscle in their bodies had reached a perfect state. Nearly 100 bone-deep wounds were left on their bodies, and the muscles around the wounds were twitching violently, trying to compress the blood vessels and control the bleeding. But the enchantment on the whips had torn their blood vessels open, and no matter how hard they tried, they could not stop the blood from flowing out. Under each of their feet was a pool of blood about 20 feet in circumference. The blood on the lower layer had coagulated and turned purple-black, while fresh blood was still flowing down from the upper layer, piling up on top of the coagulated blood on the lower layer. Judging from the thickness of the blood, the amount of blood had exceeded the total amount of blood in a normal man's body. Fortunately, Huang Liang and the others had strong fleshly bodies, which allowed them to keep extracting Pangu's sacred energy to produce fresh blood to replenish the consumption. Otherwise, they would have died from excessive blood loss. However, the cultivation technique of the human race was very different from that of the Immortals and the Buddhist League. Although they could extract Pangu's sacred energy to replenish the blood loss in a short period of time, every drop of new blood consumed their own natal energy. Unlike the Buddhist cultivators, they could not constantly replenish themselves with the natural energies. Therefore, there was a limit to the time that Huang Liang and the others could hold on. When the blood loss exceeded their limit, they would still die. The generals who stayed in the East Sea City were tied up in front of the king of East Sea's mansion and sentenced to severe punishment, while the hundreds of thousands of soldiers stationed in the East Sea City were lying on the streets and alleys of the East Sea City. Judging from the way these soldiers unsheathed their weapons, they were pouring into the city from all directions to attack the king of East Sea's mansion. But a pitch-black bell hovering over the king of East Sea's mansion had defeated their attack. Every now and then, the round bell would let out a slight chime. The chime was filled with a strange power that could take one's soul away. The soldiers of Dong Hai who had fallen to the ground were all knocked unconscious because their souls were severely shaken. Wu Qi's face darkened. It was easy to find soldiers who could temper their bodies, but it was difficult to find people who could cultivate the magic of oracles. Although the East Sea had a strong army now, the Directorate of Celestials only had a few oracles. It was obvious that the soldiers who rushed into the city had no time to produce talismans to protect their fragile souls before they were knocked unconscious by the bell. If there were enough oracles to join the battle, they would not be defeated so miserably. Among the army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, there were many generals with the cultivation base of gold immortals, while the rest of the soldiers had the overall strength of heaven immortals. Yet, they were utterly defeated by a soul-suppressing bell. Wu Qi felt his face burning. It was a little shameful, and at the same time he was burning with anger. Waving a hand to signal Ao Buzan, Lord Xianxing, and the other demon immortals to stay on the flying ship, Wu Qi flew down alone and landed in front of Huang Liang and the others. A dragon whip was about to lash out at Huang Liang's face. Wu Qi grabbed it and kicked the soldier in the lower abdomen. With one kick, Wu Qi's foot pierced through the soldier's armor, went through his lower abdomen, and came out from his back. He swung the dragon whip down hard. Before the soldier could even let out a miserable howl, the whip came down from the top of his head and split half of his body in half. Before his immortal soul could escape, it was torn to pieces by Wu Qi's whip. With a cold snort, the blood centipede sword shot out, turning into beams of blood-red light that swept across the battlefield. Before the 30 heavenly soldiers who were whipping Huang Liang and the others could see clearly what Wu Qi had produced, their bodies were torn to pieces by the sword, and their immortal souls were also killed. The heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals standing in front of the king of East Sea's mansion were stunned. They stared blankly at the mangled flesh and blood of their comrades on the ground, unable to figure out what they should do for a long time. Wu Qi sneered, threw away the dragon whip, and clapped his hands to the left and right. 2 simple palm thunders shot out whistling through the air. Wu Qi had only used the magic power equivalent to all the energies of a gold core cultivator to unleash each of them. However, with his current understanding of the heavenly Tao and his frightening cultivation base, when the 2 inconspicuous thunderbolts shot out from his palms, they immediately absorbed the surrounding natural energies. In just a blink of an eye, All the natural energies within 10,000 miles circumference were sucked dry by the thunderbolts. Accompanied by loud crackling noises, the two chaotic thunderbolts shot out and smashed heavily on the 2 rows of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. Some of the heavenly generals had already unleashed their defensive immortal artifacts, but as the thunderbolts swept across, they were all turned to dust, and more than 2,000 heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals disappeared without a trace. But the thunderbolts only engulfed the soldiers and heavenly generals, and nothing else was damaged, not even the grass on the ground. Wu Qi's control of power had really reached the realm of Tao. The remaining 1,000 heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals were stunned. They looked in horror at Wu Qi, who had killed more than half of their comrades with just a wave of his hand, as if they had seen a ghost. The front door of the King of East Sea's mansion suddenly opened, and a handsome young man in a purple robe, a purple crown on his head, a purple jade belt around his waist, and a pair of purple cloud boots walked out slowly like an eggplant. The crown prince of the celestial court, Lord Baoang, sniffled as he glanced at the corpses of the heavenly generals killed by Wu Qi and smiled faintly. "How dare you, King of East Sea? How dare you attack the imperial army of the celestial court? I'll give you a chance to redeem your life. Hand over the beautiful girl I saw last time, and I'll spare you for your disrespect today." Hearing that, Wu Qi was so angry that he laughed. Chapter 854. More than 1,000 pale-faced celestial soldiers and heavenly generals drew their weapons and surrounded Wu Qi. Their legs were trembling with fear at the sight of Wu Qi's 2 unreasonably powerful palms of thunder, and when they saw Lord Baoang, they seemed to be filled with courage at once. They were surrounded by auspicious clouds and golden light, which made them look particularly awe-inspiring in their golden armors. They truly deserved to be the imperial army of the celestial court, who specialized in guarding the celestial emperor. Wu Qi reached out his little finger and picked at his ear. But, as a primordial immortal, he had reached the realm of being spotless. Although his fingernails made his ear creak, he could not dig out anything like earwax. Flicking his fingers, Wu Qi looked at Lord Baoang and said with a smile, "What did you say, Your Highness? Can you say it again?" Lord Baoang's face darkened, and his gloomy face looked a little purple in the reflection of the purple mist that surrounded him, making him look more and more like an oily purple eggplant. With his hands clasped behind his back, he stared at Wu Qi and said with a sneer, "Hand over that beauty, kneel on the ground and kowtow to me 300 times, and I'll call it a day." Lord Baoang did not take Wu Qi's killing of more than 2,000 celestial soldiers and heavenly generals who came with him to heart. It was just 2,000 imperial soldiers, and the celestial court did not lack such a small number of soldiers. Frankly speaking, the immortals who ascended to the celestial court, those with connections, background, and strength would go to work in the various departments of the celestial court, and the worst of them would get a job in the mansions of the almighty experts or high-ranking officials of the celestial court. Only the unlucky immortals with the weakest cultivation base, no backing, and too poor to bribe their superiors would be recruited into the army of the celestial court. The death of more than 2,000 heaven immortals like Chi-Chi would be a shocking event in some country bumpkin's territory in outer heavenly realms. But what was the big deal when thousands of immortals died in the celestial court? Putting everything else aside, no less than 300 female immortals disappeared in Lord Baoang's residence every year because of all kinds of accidents. How big a deal was that? Wu Qi looked at Lord Baoang with a little surprise. Of course, he could tell the meaning behind Lord Baoang's words. He turned to look at the celestial soldiers and celestial generals who accompanied Lord Baoang. Those celestial generals were not so bad, as they were able to rise to the rank of generals in the imperial army of the celestial court, so they had something to rely on. However, the heavenly soldiers had ugly expressions on their faces. Some of them had even put down their swords and sabers and were no longer pointing at Wu Qi. Wu Qi could not help but sigh in his heart. Why did these heavenly soldiers have to suffer? He had worked so hard to become a heaven immortal, but when he ascended to the celestial court, he would be ordered around as cannon fodder. He might as well be an itinerant immortal in outer heavenly realms. Shaking his head, Wu Qi sneered, "What did the crown prince say? Can you say it again?" Lord Boang's face turned even more unsightly. He snorted coldly and said word by word, "Then listen up, King of East Sea. Bring me that beauty next to you, and I'm going to pamper her in your residence today. When I do that, you'll have to kneel outside the door and wait on me. Do you understand?" Wu Qi was burning with anger, but when his anger reached its peak, he appeared to be very calm. He smiled gently at Lord Baoang, then turned to point at Huang Liang, who was tied to a stake and could not move. "May I ask, Your Highness, what did my subordinates do to offend you and make you order me to torture them like this?" Arching his brows, Lord Baoang said indifferently, "Do I need an excuse to punish a few ants? King of East Sea, don't try to stall for time. Bring me the beauty as soon as possible, and I'll spare you the death penalty. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless when all the living beings in your East Sea are wiped out." Wu Qi turned to look at Lord Baoang. Suddenly, he burst out laughing, crossed his arms over his chest, and said with a cold snort, "It seems that your highness has forgotten one thing. This is the East Sea, my territory. This is Panga continent, the territory of Diyu. What right do you, the crown prince of the celestial court, have to tell me what to do here? You want me to offer you my wife? Who do you think you are?" A great plume of black and red flame burst out of his eyes. The wisp of nirvana flame that Wu Qi had collected in the chaos had turned into a monstrous flame that swept out in all directions. Lord Boang's face fell. With a furious roar, dozens of golden lotus flowers suddenly flew out of his body, spinning rapidly around him and sending out streams of light to protect him. But of the thousands of imperial guards of the celestial court he had brought with him, only about 1,000 remained, were swept away by the nirvana flame and turned into black ashes. Under the control of Wu Qi's powerful divine sense, the terrible flame turned into ferocious beasts and ran around in all directions. Lord Boang's chariot, the dragons that pulled it, and Chi-Chi, the Pegasus that the heavenly soldiers and generals rode, were all burned to ashes by the flame. With a point of his finger, the blood centipede sword transformed into dozens of very fine red lines and flew out, hacking the golden stakes behind Huang Liang and the other generals of the East Sea into pieces. These golden stakes were of good quality, and even with the fierce killing intent of the blood centipede sword as an innate spirit artifact, it took it a few slashes to break them. When Huang Liang and the others regained their freedom, they immediately fell to their knees and apologized to Wu Qi. "Your Highness, we've been disgraced." With a wave of Wu Qi's hand, Huang Liang and the others were rolled up by a gentle force, and they were clad in battle robes and armors. "You've been disgraced this time," said Wu Qi lightly. "You'll get it back next time. Hee, how can the crown prince of the celestial court not be guarded by experts? You're no match for them, and I won't blame you for that." Two dignified men in official robes walked slowly out of the King of East Sea's mansion. One of them was holding a jade rui scepter, which emitted a great sheet of green light to protect Lord Baoang and himself. A deep sound of waves could be heard coming from within the green light. The nirvana flame could burn everything in the world, but it could not penetrate the green light at all. Wu Qi fixed his eyes on the rui, and was shocked to find that it was actually the essence of the source water, which was the condensation of the innate water element energy in the chaos, which was of the same grade as the nirvana flame. No wonder it could withstand the attack of the nirvana flame. Fortunately, Wu Qi had unleashed the nirvana flame, a domineering divine flame of chaos. If it were any other acquired true flame or heavenly flame, it would have long been extinguished by the source water. The other man was holding a white jade seal the size of a fist. He walked slowly to Lord Boang's side and cried out in a low voice, "Crown Prince, please give me a decree to kill this guy, so as to declare the might of the celestial court." Lord Baoang nodded indifferently. He retracted the golden lotus and said lazily, "Then kill him. Remember to find the whereabouts of that beauty in his soul. Cheonghua Palace has been empty for months, and I'm waiting for that beauty to fill it up." The man with the white jade seal smiled. He raised the seal and was about to smash it down at Wu Qi. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi looked at the two ninth-tier primordial immortals of the celestial court and said coldly, "Are you out of your mind? This is the territory of Diyu. How dare you, the celestial court, attack me here? Are you trying to provoke a war between the celestial court and Diyu?" Upon hearing Wu Qi's words, Lord Baoang suddenly burst into wild laughter. "So what if I'm provoking a war? It's just a couple of years, and you, Di?" While Lord Baoang was running his mouth, the celestial court official coughed softly, and Lord Baoang immediately shut his mouth. He cleared his throat awkwardly, then turned to the celestial court official and said with a smile, "Just kill everyone in the city. Who would be able to leak this information?" The two celestial court officials exchanged a glance. The one with the jade seal smiled, raised the seal, and shouted at Wu Qi, "King of East Sea." Wu Qi gave the celestial court official a look. Without saying a word, he produced the heaven-pacifying sword and slashed at the celestial court official. Wu Qi was laughing in his heart. "Do you think I have to answer just because you call me? I've read this kind of plot too many times in fairy tales. When you call me, I answer, and the seal will have some changes waiting for me. Do you really think I'm so stupid that I have to answer just because you call me?" The celestial court official had called out to Wu Qi calmly, but Wu Qi ignored him and slashed at him with the sword. His face flickered, and he quickly performed an incantation gesture with his left hand, raising the seal and slashing it down at Wu Qi's head. As soon as the seal left his hand, it transformed into a ball of misty light the size of a human head, smashing down at Wu Qi's head with a deep, powerful rumble of thunder. Compared with the magnificent appearance of the seal, the heaven-pacifying sword Wu Qi crafted in his previous life looked ordinary and did not stand out in the slightest. It was 3 feet and 3 inches long, 3 inches and 3 centimeters wide, and 3 centimeters and 3 feet thick. Its shape was simple and unadorned, and it did not emit any light or glow. It was just an ordinary sword that met the seal head-on. Crack! An almost inaudible noise came, as if an apple had been cut open by a sharp weapon. The heaven-pacifying sword was still stabbing at the celestial court official's heart. The light of the seal was completely gone, and it was cut in half, falling to the ground and turning into a stream of light that drifted away in the blink of an eye. The celestial court official grunted and coughed out a mouthful of blood. The seal was the magical artifact he had cultivated with his life, and it was about to be upgraded into a primordial artifact by Yuan Ling. Over the years, it had smashed countless divine weapons and taken countless lives. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that an ordinary sword wielded by Wu Qi could destroy his prime magical treasure so easily. Lord Baoang was, after all, the son of the great celestial emperor, and his eyesight and knowledge were not something that ordinary people could compare with. Looking at the heaven-pacifying sword that was flying slowly, he cried out at the top of his lungs, "It's a chaotic spirit artifact. It's a chaotic spirit artifact. You're just a subject of Diyu. How could you have a chaotic spirit artifact?" The heaven-stabilizing sword seemed to be flying very slowly, and everyone could clearly see its every move. However, it was precisely this extremely slow-flying heaven-stabilizing sword that had locked onto the star official, unable to move at all. The celestial court official was coughing up mouthfuls of blood because his natal magical artifact was destroyed. He also saw the sword coming at him, but he just kept coughing up mouthfuls of blood and did not move at all. He did not even have the thought of resisting or dodging. Before the heaven-sealing sword, everything was completely frozen, including one's thoughts. The sword, which was flying at the speed of a walking man at most, easily pierced the celestial court official's heart, and then flew back to Wu Qi's hand. The light in the celestial court official's eyes dimmed, and then he fell to the ground, dead. Lord Baoang and the other celestial court officials stared at Wu Qi as if they were looking at a ghost. "How dare you kill my subject?" Lord Baoang growled. "King of East Sea, die." Wu Qi stepped forward, broke the water shield with the sword, and slapped Lord Baoang in the face. With a ferocious and twisted smile on his face, Wu Qi stamped his foot on Lord Baoang's abdomen again and burst out laughing. "I'm going to be executed by the heaven with my whole clan, aren't I? Before I die, you'll die with me." The other celestial court official came to his senses. He quickly performed a spell with both hands, trying to deal with Wu Qi, but a spear and a halberd came silently from behind him. The spear pierced his heart, and the halberd pierced his forehead. The celestial court official trembled, and was killed on the spot by the sneak attack of Ao Buzan and Lord Xianxing. Grabbing Lord Baoang by the neck and lifting him up, Wu Qi sneered at Huang Liang and said, "Tie him up and whip him at will." Huang Liang and the other generals of the East Sea were overjoyed. They cupped their fists and answered with a loud voice. Chapter 855. Above the East Sea City, on a thin cloud 1,000 feet above the ground, on a white bone stake made of the bones of spirit beasts, Lord Baoang, naked, was tied up by dozens of soft ropes woven from reeds, unable to move. These reed ropes were green in color, and there were countless strange runes engraved on them with human blood. Although they were just ordinary ropes made from reeds, with the addition of these runes, they had an extremely strong restrictive power. At most, these ropes could only imprison a peak-level gold immortal, but Lord Baoang had stepped into the realm of 9th-tier primordial 1 eons ago. Of course, as the crown prince of the celestial court, Lord Baoang's overall strength came more from the virtues in the mortal world. He was the so-called primordial of virtues. Although he had the attainment of a primordial expert, he did not have the foundation of a primordial expert, and his magic power and cultivation base were only equal to that of an ordinary upper-tier gold immortal. Therefore, he could not withstand a single blow from Wu Qi. Therefore, these ropes could easily imprison Lord Baoang, and no matter how hard he struggled, he could not move. If he wanted to get out of this predicament, there was another way. If he cracked the top of his head and fled with his immortal soul, abandoning his fleshly body, with his attainment of the realm of primordial, these ropes could not imprison him. But he had gone through a lot of hardships to obtain this golden body of primordial, so how could he give it up? So, he could only curse at the top of his lungs while being trapped on the bone stake, letting the soldiers and civilians of the East Sea admire his fair and flawless body. Hovering above the thin cloud were dozens of whips made of the skin of venomous pythons, all dipped in strange venom and enchanted with all kinds of strange runes. From time to time, groups of East Sea soldiers would ride their mounts and soar into the sky, land on the cloud, grab the whips and lash Lord Baoang's head and face. The restrictive runes on the whips made them as sharp as blades and as heavy as mountains, and every lash tore open Lord Baoang's flesh and made him bleed profusely. The whip was soaked in venom. The scarlet venom invaded his body and stimulated his nerves and muscle fibers, magnifying his pain by 100 times. Although he had the cultivation base of a primordial immortal, he still kept shrieking in pain. His shrieks could be heard hundreds of miles away by the wind. Over the past 2 days, many children living near the East Sea City had been woken up by his shrieks in the middle of the night. The venom could not only magnify the pain Lord Baoang was suffering, but it also contained a very strong life force. The venom seeped into his body and stimulated his body to quickly heal his wounds. Every lash of the whip tore open his muscles and skin. After the whip passed through his body, under the stimulation of the venom, his muscles wriggled and grew rapidly. The strange itchiness when his wounds healed was another deadly punishment. Especially, the venom had magnified the itch by hundreds of times, which made Lord Baoang realize what it meant to live a life worse than death. It had been 2 days since he was captured by Wu Qi, and Lord Baoang had been tortured on the cloud. On the first day, it was Huang Liang and the other 19 generals of East Sea who happily whipped him all day long. Lord Baoang's skin and flesh were badly mutilated, and his flesh was almost pulled off from his bones. Had it not been for the powerful life force of the scarlet venom, Lord Baoang would have long been turned into a skeleton. The next day, it was time for the generals and soldiers of East Sea to take turns to enjoy the pleasure of beating the crown prince of the celestial court. The crown prince of the celestial court was a figure who stood at the pinnacle of the universe. How could the generals and soldiers of East Sea, who had been brainwashed by Wu Qi and were loyal to him, let go of the chance to beat him at will? A huge wooden box was placed under the cloud, with a few civil officials of East Sea sitting lazily beside it. When they saw the generals and soldiers of East Sea passing by, they shouted, "Beat the Crown Prince! Whip the Crown Prince! 10 lashes for 3 copper coins, and only 20 copper coins for 100 lashes at once. You won't get another chance like this if you miss this opportunity. Beat the Crown Prince! Beat the Crown Prince! Beat the Crown Prince of the Celestial Court!" It was an insult, a downright insult. Not only was it an insult to Lord Baoong, but it had also trampled on the face of the Celestial Court. Wu Qi was angry that Lord Baoong had coveted Princess Zhonglu, and even angrier that he had led an army into the East Sea City. Since Lord Baoong thought he did not give Wu Qi face, he would let him know what it was like to slap the face. On a tall pagoda in the middle of the King of East Sea's mansion, Wu Qi, Ao Buzan, Lord Xianxing, and a group of demon immortals were drinking and having fun. From time to time, some of them would look at Lord Baoong, who was screaming as he was beaten, and happily drink a cup of wine with his screams. After watching for a while, Catfish picked up a wine jar and drank half of it in annoyance, then snapped, "Why hasn't this guy cracked his own head and fled with his immortal soul? I've told you one of his legs is mine. Once his immortal soul is gone, we'll immediately divide his soft and tender flesh." When Catfish mentioned the matter, Goldhorn, Silverhorn, and a few others began to drool. The group of demon cultivators looked at Lord Baoong eagerly, hoping that he would flee with his immortal soul and be done with it. Since Wu Qi had given him a chance to flee with his immortal soul, why didn't he do it? As long as he did, this fragrant, fair, and tender primordial golden body would be in their mouths. Catfish and the others had eaten countless immortals and cultivators, but they had never tasted the body of a primordial immortal. Especially when this Lord Baoong was the crown prince of the Celestial Court. Just for his identity, they had to give him a good meal. For Catfish and the others, who had solved the problem of food and clothing, everything they ate now was food, and it was time to pay attention to taste. Ordinary cultivators were too lazy to eat it, but they were a little interested in heaven immortals. Usually, eating a gold immortal was a serious feast, but this primordial golden body was equivalent to a Manchu Han imperial feast, not something they could eat normally. So, they were drooling while waiting for Lord Baoong to crack his own head and flee with his immortal soul. Wu Qi had already set up a follow-up plan to deliberately tease Lord Baoong. When his immortal soul was some distance away, when he was glad that he had escaped, the 6 blood-draining celestial fiends, who had sealed off the universe millions of miles away, would naturally tell him what a boundless nightmare was. When that time came, Lord Baoong's fleshly body would be their food. How wonderful would that be? Especially Ao Buzan. He kept pouring wine into his wine vessel, spilling it all over the ground. "What a nice human whip, the whip of a primordial immortal," he murmured. "It's a great tonic for energy and yang. Should I put it in a hot pot or stir-fry it? Or should I just slice it and dip it in mustard? That's also a way to eat it, isn't it?" Lord Baoong's miserable howls kept ringing out. Wu Qi sat upright in a large chair and watched as dozens of East Ocean soldiers whipped Lord Baoong until he was bleeding profusely. His eyes were as cold as 10,000-year-old ice cubes. Lord Baoong had leaked the news 2 days ago. So, in 2 or 3 years at most, the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League would launch a full-scale attack? Once they did, there would be no turning back for Yu, the Celestial Court, and the Buddhist League. When that happened, Wu Qi would have to face the Celestial Court no matter what. No matter how he humiliated Lord Baoong now, he would have to face the Celestial Court in the end. If that was the case, how could Wu Qi let Lord Baoong have an easy time since he had foolishly knocked on his door and asked for death? "I'll have to do it sooner or later. You're the crown prince of the Celestial Court, so it's a good time to kill you as a sacrifice." Wu Qi snorted coldly. "You don't know what you're talking about. Do you really think the Celestial Court will win for sure? How dare you come here at this time to court death? I'm helping you achieve your goal. If you want to die, I'll send you to hell." Just as he was thinking of something ruthless, a purple cloud drifted down from the sky, bringing with it a strange fragrance. Colorful heavenly flowers of various colors were drifting down, each emanating a strong fragrance that refreshed the senses of those who smelled it. A celestial lord, clad in a long robe that was as light as flowing water and holding a purple scroll in his hand, was slowly descending toward the East Ocean City with a solemn expression. Behind the celestial lord's purple cloud, 100 square cloud platforms also slowly descended, each with 1,000,000 heavenly soldiers and generals standing solemnly. They descended silently from the sky, emanating a tremendous pressure that made the air around the East Ocean City stagnate. When he was still 100 miles above the ground, the celestial lord pressed down the cloud, unfolded the purple scroll in his hand, and read it out emotionlessly. His Majesty has decreed that the King of East Ocean, Diyu, is to return Lord Baoang to you, and no one will be held accountable for what happened in the past. Closing the scroll, the celestial lord looked at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, "King of East Ocean, please release the crown prince of the celestial court." Wu Qi rose to his feet slowly and flew slowly to the celestial lord. He studied the celestial lord for a while. He was only an 18th tier gold immortal, but the quality of the robe he was wearing was very high, making him an important subject of the celestial court. Clearly, this celestial lord had a strong backing, which was why he could occupy a high position in the celestial court with the strength of an 18th tier gold immortal. After studying the celestial lord for a while, Wu Qi said indifferently, "What if I don't release him?" The celestial lord narrowed his eyes at Wu Qi and said with a sneer, "The army of the celestial court will trample the East Ocean to the ground." Wu Qi picked his ear with one hand, then wiped his fingers on the robe on the chest of the celestial lord. "Do you dare, celestial court?" Wu Qi patted the celestial lord's face and said with a chuckle, "I won't release him. If you want to release him, ask the great celestial emperor to come here and admit in front of me that he has failed to teach his son well, that he has taught a mad dog to bite people everywhere. The great celestial emperor must compensate me with the compensation for the loss of 10 billion elite soldiers in the East Ocean, as well as the compensation for the loss of 100 billion civilians. By the way, the Crown Prince has raped 1 trillion civilians in the East Ocean, so you have to calculate the compensation carefully." The celestial lord's face turned purple with anger at Wu Qi's action, and then he laughed when he heard the astronomical figure Wu Qi mentioned. Trembling, he pointed at Wu Qi and said, Good, what an arrogant man. You are so domineering and rude, and the disaster of the East Ocean is right in front of you." Wu Qi touched his nose, then suddenly smiled at the celestial lord and said, "I'm wrong, I'm really wrong. Please forgive me, celestial lord." The celestial lord's face became much better. "Now that you know you are wrong, it proves that the East Ocean can still be saved," he said with a cold smile. Wu Qi nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, I'm really wrong. The Crown Prince did not rape 1 trillion civilians in the East Ocean, but he took the sows raised by the people of the East Ocean and..." The celestial lord's face turned blue with anger. With a roar, he interrupted Wu Qi, pointed at Wu Qi and cursed, "What an arrogant man. You are out of your mind. The East Ocean will be destroyed here today." Wu Qi snorted coldly and swung the blood centipede sword, cutting off the celestial lord's arms and legs, then kicking him away. With blood centipede sword in hand, Wu Qi pointed at the heavenly soldiers and generals on the cloud platforms in the sky and snapped, "Go back and tell your heaven and earth that the East Ocean is here. Do you really dare to invade the territory of the East Ocean?" A heavenly general, clad in purple armor and riding a black qilin, walked slowly out of the ranks. The heavenly general, who looked to be in his 50s, gave Wu Qi a deep look and said indifferently, "Arrogant man, the disaster of the East Ocean is right in front of you." He fixed his eyes on Lord Baoang, who was tied up and thrashed, then raised his right hand and waved it. The heavenly soldiers and generals on the cloud platforms shouted in unison, and the clouds quickly flew up into the sky and left. Wu Qi's face turned gloomy. Chapter 856. Lord Baoang could not care less about his identity as the Crown Prince of the Celestial Court. He cried and begged Princess Zhanglu, begging for his own death. But how could a man who had offended Princess Zhanglu die so easily? Lord Baoang, who had become more like a monster than a human, was locked in an iron cage and hung in front of the city gate. Next to him was a yellow silk cloth with the words Lord Baoang, the crown prince of the celestial court, written on it, allowing the soldiers and civilians to see it. Every 3 to 5 days, someone would go and cut off one of Lord Baoang's arms and legs, then remove 3 to 5 parts of him. Then, someone would heal him with immortal pills and mystic arts, and the severed arms and legs would regrow. The severed arms and legs would not rot for a while, so Chi-Chi piled them up under the iron cage where Lord Baoang was imprisoned. Magic power, fleshly body, and divine soul. Lord Baoang was being tortured in the East Sea, but the celestial court never made a move again. On the basis of heaven refining grand magic, Wu Qi had fused the advantages of Pangu's sacred energy and innate dragon energy, and tempered his fleshly body with Yuan Ling's clear energy, Pangu's sacred energy, and innate dragon energy at the same time. The strength of his new fleshly body could no longer be judged by the current standard in the world of immortal cultivators, and was beyond common sense. A wisp of innate thieving aura plundered everything, and heaven refining grand magic had forged it all into one. The enormous chaotic energy in Wu Qi's body had also been tempered, and the already extremely pure chaotic energy was refined by the freakish heaven refining grand magic. Out of 10,000 portions of chaotic energy, one portion was finally refined into the primordial purple energy, which only appeared briefly when the great Saint Pangu created the world, and was only heard about through the grapevine even among the chaotic fiend celestials and demons. Heaven refining grand magic used one's own body as the material, and with the help of the heaven refining cauldron, it melted everything in the world into one. Yuan Ling's clear energy, unique to Yuan Ling's nether realm, was the fuel of the cauldron, and Yuan Ling's clear energy could best strengthen the fleshly body and the divine soul. In the past, Elder Yuan Ling's physical body was ranked in the top 3 among countless chaotic divine demons because of the refining of heaven technique. The internal strife in the palace was filled with endless means, and all kinds of dark tortures were the cruelest. Furious, Princess Zhonglu ordered the old eunuchs in Great Yen Palace to torture Lord Baoang with the cruelest means. So, 7 days later, Lord Baoang was turned into a piece of bacon. His cultivation base was completely destroyed, his immortal soul was sealed in his fleshly body by Princess Zhonglu with the 7 orifices soul-subduing nail, and he was forced to drink a powerful life-prolonging pill so that he could not die. Lord Baoang howled hoarsely as he was subjected to all kinds of punishments invented by tyrants such as Xia Jie and Shang Zhou. After 7 days and 7 nights of howling, he was turned into a living piece of bacon. After cultivating so many strange techniques, although Wu Qi had used his chaos spiritual energy to remove the impure spiritual energy from his body, these techniques had still left a trace of mark in his body, making his body no longer pure. However, heaven refining grand magic was a technique that could refine one's body to the purest state. But when she saw Lord Baoang tied up naked in midair and tortured by Wu Qi, and heard that he had that unspeakable thought about her, Princess Zhonglu exploded on the spot. The feast of a primordial immortal that Ao Buzan and the other demon immortals had been planning for a long time could not be enjoyed, and Lord Baoang was tortured by Princess Zhonglu with the methods of the palace. During the first 300 years of secluded meditation, Wu Qi did nothing but train all his flesh, blood, and energy. He only sought to forge himself with perfection, but he never dreamed that when he refined all his blood essence and spiritual energy into one, including the enormous amount of spiritual energy provided by all the energy veins in his interstitial world and all the spiritual energy he had absorbed in the past 300 years, he finally turned into a wisp of extremely pure and indestructible primordial purple qi. Even with the support of endless energy and the countless divine trees in Yuan Ling's nether realm, Wu Qi's cultivation base did not progress as fast as the shadowy figure said. That was because Wu Qi had used heaven refining grand magic to refine all his techniques from scratch. The flow of time 2,000 times faster was the limit of what Wu Qi could achieve with his current magic power. Although his cultivation base was already equivalent to the realm of Tao breaking, the accumulation of his magic power had not kept up in time, so the flow of time in Dark Een Celestial Tower was still the same. As long as Wu Qi continued to improve his magic power, the flow of time in Dark Yin Celestial Tower would naturally become faster and faster. The true body of heaven and earth scripture was derived from Pangu's body tempering technique, while the dragon transformation script was derived from Arko Zhu Long's body tempering technique. It was not the original form of those two cultivation techniques, so how could it compare with the powerful fleshly body refined by Yuan Ling's heaven refining grand magic? Wu Qi began to refine his body inch by inch from the most basic level, using heaven refining grand magic to refine his body. The immortal energy of primordial immortals and zenith heaven golden immortals was merely borrowed from the power of the heavenly Tao. The difference was the amount of the heavenly Tao contained in the immortal energy, and the purity of the immortal energy varied. But the primordial purple energy was the pure condensation of the heavenly Tao, and the spells triggered by the primordial purple energy were the specific manifestation of the power of the heavenly Tao. Even the power of an ordinary palm thunder was no different from the heavenly tribulation of the heavenly Tao. The aura of thievery and the primordial purple energy were calcined as one, and with a thought in Wu Qi's mind, he began to extract the natural energy around him in an almost predatory manner. The speed at which he absorbed energy was at least 10,000 times faster than before, and his magic power was improving at a rate that could scare other primordial immortals to death. During the 30 years of training, Wu Qi's 18 blood-draining celestial fiends had brainwashed these soldiers and oracles with the magic of the Fiend League, instilling in them the belief of absolute loyalty to Wu Qi every day. No matter where these soldiers and oracles were from, whether they were natives of Pangu continent or the descendants of the Six Dynasties, when they came into this spirit cave, there was only one thing engraved in the depths of their souls: absolute loyalty to Wu Qi, and they would die for Wu Qi at any time. This time, the crazy training in the East Sea was different from the last time in Yuxiong Plain. With dozens of primordial immortals under Wu Qi's command to help train these soldiers, and with the help of countless innate divine trees in Yuan Ling's nether realm, the cultivation base of these soldiers and oracles was 100 times faster than when they were in Yuxiong Plain. After 300 years of cultivation in the spirit cave, Wu Qi's magic power had broken through to the 7th-tier primordial immortal realm, and the flow of time in Dark Yin Celestial Tower had increased by 4,000 times. 500 years later, he would become a 6th-tier primordial immortal, and the flow of time would increase by 1,000 times again. 600 years later, he would become a 5th-tier primordial immortal, and the flow of time would increase by 1,000 times again. Your Excellency, the third prince of the Celestial Court is cursing us outside the city. The huge spirit cave was densely packed with countless military camps. Deafening battle cries could be heard all day long, and the sounds of priests chanting spells and practicing magic could be heard everywhere. The cultivation techniques of the human race were the fastest to master. Basically, every 30 years, a new batch of oracles and soldiers would be replaced, because their cultivation bases had reached a certain level. The reason why Yuan Ling could make a name for himself in the chaotic world with his alchemy and artifact refinement was that the strength of his divine soul could rank in the top 3 among all the chaotic fiend gods. Only a divine soul that was extremely powerful and could be controlled to the finest detail could perfectly control the temperature of the furnace and produce supreme-grade spirit pills and artifacts. Without primordial violet energy, one could still fuse with the Tao one day if he had enough fortune and opportunity. But with primordial violet energy, it was like having a special pass. As long as one's cultivation base improved gradually, one could naturally reach the realm of Tao fusing without encountering any bottlenecks. Everyone was wholeheartedly cultivating, hoping to make a breakthrough, and naturally, Wu Qi was the same. His clones were busy everywhere, while his true form was cultivating in seclusion in the heart of the spirit cave, right under the pyramid. It was also the place where the energy in the spirit cave was the densest, and it was almost compressed into an energy crystal. There was another term for primordial violet energy among the chaotic fiend gods, the foundation of Tao fusing. Wu Qi and Princess Zhang soon forgot about Lord Baoang, an arrogant man, and devoted themselves to improving the overall strength of the East Sea. Hundreds of millions of carefully selected soldiers and millions of oracles were secretly sent to the spirit cave under the king of East Sea's mansion, and Wu Qi used Dark Ean's celestial tower to accelerate the flow of time to help everyone improve their strength. If he had not had to temper his fleshly body and divine soul while improving his magic power and cultivation base, he might have been able to reach the realm of Dao breaking in just a few decades, and possess the cultivation base of a 6th-tier Dao breaking expert. The emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties had also entered the spirit cave to cultivate, and from time to time, Wu Qi manifested a clone with his divine soul to teach them the essence of the Great Path. Under Wu Qi's deliberate cultivation, the progress of the emperors and ministers of the 6 dynasties was even faster. Coupled with the various spirit liquids provided by the various innate divine trees in Yuanling's nether realm, the speed of cultivation of Yandan, Yingjing, and the others was much faster than that of Patriarch Jiang Yun and the others. These ordinary soldiers and oracles did not have the fortune to enjoy the pills concocted from the innate divine trees in Yuanling's nether realm. Not to mention them, even Wu Qi dared not to take them now. But by taking a drop or two of the liquid from these divine trees and diluting it with the clear water in a pool, the water in the pool would have all kinds of incredible effects. It could either temper one's fleshly body or strengthen one's soul. All in all, it had great benefits and provided a great help to the army and the oracles of the East Sea. At the foot of the pyramid, the heaven refining cauldron was burning with a purple flame. Wu Qi sat cross-legged in it, allowing the purple flame to temper him, treating himself like a piece of metal and refining him crazily. Starting with the most basic art of qi refining, he slowly tempered himself with the heaven refining grand magic. At the same time, he kept refining Yuanling's energy and the countless spirit liquids collected from the divine trees into his body. And so, Wu Qi slowly tempered himself in the cauldron, improving his overall strength at a steady pace. Finally, one day, the flow of time in Dark Ean's celestial tower accelerated to 10,000 times, and Wu Qi's cultivation base stopped at the level of peak-level primordial immortal. Lord Baoong could only watch as his arms, legs, and internal organs piled up into a small hill before his eyes, and every 2 or 3 days, he had to suffer the inhumane torture of having his limbs cut off and his abdomen cut open. He could neither live nor die, and could only struggle and wail in the iron cage every day, begging for death. He regretted so much that he had offended a terrible woman like Princess Zhonglu, but there was no medicine for regret in the world. Lord Baoong's fate was miserable. Wu Qi could not help but shudder at the thought of how miserable it was. Immersed in the heaven-refining grand magic, Wu Qi continued to cultivate without any sorrow or joy. A vast amount of energy fused into his body, and there was no more chaotic energy inside him. Instead, there was a vast expanse of purple mist rising and filling him with a faint purple mist. Any random movement of his would cause the purple mist to rise, and the void around him would become blurry like porridge. A sharp voice rang out and interrupted Wu Qi's cultivation. It was like this. Princess Zhonglu had helped the people of the 6 dynasties migrate all the people and armies to the East Sea. She had been in high spirits, but after she found hundreds of thousands of good seedlings suitable for practicing the magic of the ghost deity, which belonged to Oracle Deyu, she happily brought them back to the East Sea city, preparing to train her disciples with the help of the underground spirit cave. Chapter 857. A challenge from the third prince of the celestial court? Wu Qi gave a cold snort. The heaven-refining cauldron transformed into a stream of flame and shot into his forehead, leaving a faint shadow of a purple cauldron on his forehead. He shook his body lightly, and a series of crisp popping noises rang out from all his joints. Wu Qi waved his hands to both sides, and an invisible and traceless stream of energy wrapped around him spread out in all directions, enveloping the entire spirit cave in an instant. Long roars rang out incessantly, and all the soldiers and oracles of the East Sea who were undergoing training in the spirit cave had their cultivation improved by 1 to 3 to 5 grades at the same time. The stream of energy unleashed by Wu Qi was the impure energy extracted from his body. But for other cultivators, it was like a supreme spirit pill, as it had a magical power that could make one ascend into an immortal from the ground. Not to mention the ordinary soldiers and oracles, even the almighty experts who had stepped into the realm of primordial, such as Princess Zhonglu, felt their bodies heating up as a vast force carrying an endless stream of energy was injected into their bodies. After they circulated the energy 49 times, it transformed into a stream of pure magic power and entered their bodies. Their magic power was actually improved by 1 grade by the stream of energy unleashed by Wu Qi. A strange light flickered, and a long roar towered into the sky. A column of flame rose from the top of Princess Zhongli's head, and a golden body of the god of fire, shrouded in purple flames, slowly took shape above her. In the distance, the Emperor of Great Chu, Chu Ping, let out a long roar as 3 balls of dark air rushed out from the top of his head. 3 statues of deities, who looked exactly the same as Chu Ping, but dressed in a very simple and unadorned robe, slowly took shape amidst the 3 balls of dark air. They were the god of mountain, the god of rain, and the god of water. Chu Ping cultivated the divine magic of the natural branch of the divine Tao of Yin ghosts, and the 3 deities he formed were the gods of mountains and rivers, possessing the magical power to control mountains, rain, and rivers. With the 3 golden bodies of deities accompanying him, as long as Chu Ping stepped into a place with mountains, rain, and water, he would be able to use the force of nature to kill his enemies, and he would not have to worry about exhausting his magic power. The emperors and courtiers of the other 6 states had also benefited greatly. They let out long roars of joy and bowed to Wu Qi from afar. Through the bow, the emperors and courtiers of the 6 states saw Wu Qi at the same time, and they could not help but be shocked. Wu Qi was shrouded in purple mist, and with every move he made, the void around him had become so blurry that he could no longer be seen clearly. Every movement he made was so natural, as if this was how a human should do it. Every single strand of his hair that danced in the air had an absolutely beautiful charm that made people unable to extricate themselves from it. The emperors and courtiers of the 6 states, who were just bowing to express their gratitude, were stunned. Regardless of their status and age, everyone cupped their fists and bowed to Wu Qi solemnly again. What they respected was not Wu Qi, but the charm that Wu Qi displayed, the Tao. They were honoring the heavenly Tao, not Wu Qi himself. Wu Qi clapped his hands gently, and the 18 blood-draining celestial fiends turned into blood shadows and flew into the top of his head. Over the years, he had been cultivating hard in the heaven-refining cauldron, and the blood-draining celestial fiends had not let go of their cultivation bases. Although these clones were not as strong as his true form, they had all reached the level of 6th-tier primordial immortals. If they were released, they would be able to occupy a territory in the 9 heavens. Some reckless juniors have come to the East Sea looking for trouble. I'll go and have a look. Everyone, please continue your cultivation. It's not a big deal. Wu Qi chuckled and cupped his fist at the crowd, then drifted lightly toward the exit of the spirit cave, leaving a trail of afterimages behind him. Since fusing with the wisdom of Yuan Ling's previous life, Wu Qi's character had not changed much. But when he talked about someone, he would always address them as juniors. After all, Wu Qi was not very old himself, and coupled with the time he had spent cultivating hard in Dark Yin Celestial Tower, he was not even 10,000 years old, which made him a real junior. But if his previous life was taken into account, his seniority was higher than Wu Qi. Yuan Ling was an existence of the same generation as Pangu. Whether it was the Celestial Court, the Buddhist League, the Human Emperor of Diyu, or even the Sacred Emperor, Xinyuan, none of them dared to compare seniority with Wu Qi. As he sensed the wonderful feeling of emptiness and yet fullness in his body, Wu Qi laughed and drifted out of the spirit cave. He flew straight out of the mansion and landed lightly on the south gate where Lord Baoang was hanging. Although thousands of years had passed in the spirit cave, only 5 months had passed in the outside world. Near the south gate of East Sea City, hundreds of arms, legs, and colorful internal organs were piled up on the 2 sections of the wall close to the gate. These parts were all cut from Lord Baoang's body over the past few months, and Chi-Chi had piled them up at the foot of the wall. They looked horrible. For the past 2 months, the people of East Sea City had rarely walked through the south gate. Huang Liang and the other generals of East Sea City were standing on the wall with a large group of soldiers. When they saw Wu Qi arrive, Huang Liang breathed a sigh of relief. He came up to Wu Qi and whispered, "Your Excellency, that boy who cursed us has a vicious tongue. Every word he said was about your ancestor. I dare not tell you the truth." With a snort, Wu Qi clasped his hands behind his back and looked coldly at the small army a few miles outside the city. 300 heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals in silver armors were surrounding a handsome young man who rode on a 5-colored elk, clad in a 5-colored brocade robe and a series of Qilin armor. The young man looked to be only 14 or 15 years old, and he was holding a pair of 12-section purple-gold sword breakers in his hands. When he swung them, they would send out dazzling beams of light. They were 2 supreme-grade gold immortal artifacts. Wu Qi was shocked when he glanced at the sword breakers with his chaotic divine eyes. With his identity as the 3rd prince of the celestial court, it was only right for him to have 2 supreme-grade gold immortal artifacts. If he did not, he would look shabby. But the person who crafted these 2 sword breakers was not an ordinary person. There were only 12 simple talismans on each of the 12 sword breakers, each of which had the power to move mountains and drain seas, as well as the ability to pluck stars from the sky. Once these 2 sword breakers were unleashed, any ordinary immortal would be killed instantly. At this moment, the 3rd prince of the celestial court pointed the sword breaker at the top of the city wall and snapped, "You shameless villain! How dare you harm my brother with such a vicious punishment? Put my brother down at once, or I'll turn all your people into ashes with one swing of my sword breaker." He paused for a moment, then suddenly cursed, "And that treacherous king of East Sea of yours? He is really a lowly son of pigs and dogs. How dare he take away my brother's lover and humiliate him like this? Ask the king of East Sea to come out and face his death." Wu Qi twitched his mouth. Although the 3rd prince was the 3rd prince of the celestial court, his cultivation base was only at the level of a 2nd-tier heaven immortal. However, there were a few experts among the heavenly soldiers and generals behind him, and the strongest among them was an 8th-tier primordial immortal who cultivated both Buddhism and Taoism. Judging from the faint aura emanating from him, if Wu Qi did not practice the heaven-refining grand magic, Wu Qi would not be his match if they were at the same realm and cultivation base. Clearing his throat, Wu Qi said in a clear voice, "3rd Prince, I'm Wu Qi, the King of East Sea." With his current cultivation base, Wu Qi did not care about titles, so he openly used his real name. The 3rd Prince raised his eyebrows, pointed a finger at Wu Qi and cursed, "You're the despicable thief. Release my brother at once and hand over the beauty he has taken a fancy to. Otherwise, all the living beings in the East Sea will be reduced to dust today." Wu Qi gave the 3rd prince a deep look, who had a weak cultivation base but a very arrogant tone. Then he looked up into the sky. With his current cultivation base, he could see through the 33 heavens, all the way to the 9 heavens. As long as he wanted to, he could see everything in the universe clearly. But what puzzled Wu Qi was that there was no one in the sky to help him. There were only a few heavenly generals on duty walking back and forth lazily in front of the southern gate of the 33 heavens, and there was no sign of an ambush. Wu Qi was stunned. He stamped a few iron chains on the battlements, shaking the cage that imprisoned Lord Baoong. "Lord Baoong, this 3rd prince is not your father's son, is he? How dare he invade the East Sea with just the cultivation base of a 2nd-tier heaven immortal?" Lord Baoong, whose soul was almost disintegrated from the torture, shuddered and screamed, "Don't hit me! Don't hit me! Lord Boyong is indeed my brother. It's just that he was born with an incomplete soul, and his progress in the cultivation of immortal magic is very slow, so he only has the cultivation base of a 2nd-tier heaven immortal now. But he is my brother, the only remaining son of my father and mother, and he is the closest to me." Wu Qi understood. The great celestial emperor of the celestial court had the empress and countless concubines, so he had countless children. Lord Baoong was the eldest son of the empress, so he was made the crown prince of the celestial court. Lord Boyong was the 2nd son of the empress, and he was Lord Boang's blood brother. But how could the great celestial emperor's child be born with an incomplete soul? This was too strange. Wu Qi did not say a word. Seeing that Wu Qi was ignoring him, the third prince, Lord Boyong, felt a surge of arrogance rising in his heart. He clamped his legs and sat down on the five-colored elk, then snapped, "You reckless bastard!" The elk turned into a beam of light and rushed to the top of the city wall, while Lord Boyong raised the purple gold swordbreaker and smashed it down at Wu Qi's head. As soon as the swordbreaker moved, the void above Wu Qi's head collapsed with a boom, and the time and space were torn to pieces. An invisible force came at him, trying to imprison Wu Qi's body. It was a very strong force, and if caught by it, even those primordial immortals with a slightly weaker foundation would suffer a great loss, not to mention ordinary gold immortals. The expert who crafted this pair of swordbreakers was truly an incredible expert. With the standard of a gold immortal artifact, he was able to unleash a power that was not weaker than a 9th-grade primordial artifact. It was indeed the means of a grandmaster. But for Wu Qi, this attack was not enough. He did not even bother to strike. Wu Qi looked up at the two swordbreakers that were falling down from above. Lord Boyang's hands shook, and his wrists were broken at the same time. The swordbreakers spun and flew up into the sky, only to be driven away by Wu Qi's glare. Lord Boyang shrieked as he leaped onto a white cloud and fled into the distance. Wu Qi snorted coldly and pointed out a finger. A wisp of primal purple energy, which attracted the thunderbolts of heaven and earth, turned into a thunderbolt as thick as a water tank and struck down at Lord Boyong. With the cultivation base of a mere second-tier heaven immortal, Wu Qi's thunderbolt had triggered the laws of heaven and earth, and its power was comparable to the heavenly tribulation of a 9th-tier primordial immortal. How could Lord Boyong withstand such a powerful thunderbolt? At that very moment, the 8th-tier primordial immortal who had been hiding behind Lord Boyong sprung up, curled his body into a ball and threw a punch at the thunderbolt. As he punched, he sneered and scolded, "How dare the king of East Sea? How dare you?" Before his voice could fade away, a loud rumble rang out as the thunderbolt struck the heavenly immortal. Countless electric bolts shot out in all directions. The heavenly immortal howled miserably as half of his body was smashed to pieces by the thunderbolt. He barely managed to grab Lord Boyong, who was pale with fright, and fled into the sky in a panic, not even bothering with the 300 soldiers behind him. Looking at the fleeing heavenly immortal, Wu Qi smiled, flicked his sleeve, and turned to leave. He did not bother to chase after him. Chapter 858. The reason why Wu Qi imprisoned Lord Baoang instead of killing him was to avoid excessively provoking the celestial court. Even if Lord Baoang was humiliated as long as he was alive, the celestial court would not do anything too drastic. When their final plan was about to be launched, the celestial court would not go to war for an inexplicable crown prince who had stirred up trouble because of his lust for a woman, unless Wu Qi killed him. For the same reason, Wu Qi had driven Lord Baoang away instead of killing him. What was the point of killing a second-tier heaven immortal? It was nothing more than to provoke the celestial court into attacking the East Sea. Moreover, the mighty third crown prince of the celestial court was born with an incomplete soul, which caused his cultivation to be too slow. What kind of excuse was that? Only heaven knew what kind of unspeakable grudges this third crown prince had hidden behind him. And perhaps there was some almighty expert standing behind him. Wu Qi did not want to provoke too many people rashly. In short, he decided to let Lord Baoang suffer a little first. As long as the celestial court did not do anything, Wu Qi would never do anything. Wu Qi returned to the underground spirit cave and continued to practice heaven-refining grand magic, stabilize his foundation, and improve his cultivation base. With the wisdom of his previous life and the various supreme scriptures he had obtained in this life, Wu Qi had fused them with heaven-refining grand magic. He felt that his Tao heart was clear, and he had taken a big step forward compared to what he had obtained in his previous life. During this session of cultivation, Wu Qi brought Princess Zhonglu along with him. He was not in a hurry to improve his magic power and cultivation base, and instead, he focused all his attention on improving Princess Zhongli's body. The primordial Tao of divinity was mysterious and extremely powerful, and it could often kill people without them noticing. It was an extremely rare help. Even though Wu Qi was made of iron, how many nails could he hit? He needed an assistant who was strong enough. Therefore, Princess Zhongli also entered the heaven refining cauldron and trained day and night with Wu Qi. Apart from Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli, who were trying their best to improve their cultivation base, Patriarch Jiang Yun had also started studying the pill technique taught by Wu Qi. Together with his 2 wives and his best friends, Immortal Qing Xin and his 2 brothers, he led over 10,000 disciples of the underhand sect, who were very talented in alchemy, and began to concoct all kinds of pills in large quantities. In any case, there were countless ordinary medicinal herbs planted in the spirit cave, enough for these disciples to practice. In Yuan Ling's nether realm, there were all kinds of extremely precious innate divine trees, which could allow immortals with profound cultivation bases like Patriarch Jiang Yun and the other immortals to concoct excellent primordial immortal pills. Supremacy 3 Flame had inherited Wu Qi's artifact scripture, and as he was an expert in using flames, he was able to craft all kinds of magical items with ease and ease. Together with over 10,000 disciples of the underhand sect and several tens of thousands of craftsmen from the East Sea, he forged all kinds of magical items for the immortals, demon cultivators, ordinary soldiers, and oracles of the East Sea according to the artifact crafting technique Wu Qi had studied in his previous life. With Yuan Ling's attainment in the Tao of artifact crafting, he could easily improve the power of the magical items by a large margin with just some ordinary techniques. Under Supremacy 3 Flame's painstaking study and spirit of striving for perfection, the equipment in the East Sea was much better than the standard equipment in Diyu and the Celestial Court. In order to prepare for the coming chaos, all the people in the East Sea were mobilized. Mineral veins were dug in secret, and countless ores, energy stones, and immortal stones were sent into the forging rooms in the Spirit Cave. In this Spirit Cave, where time flowed 10,000 times faster, tens of thousands of craftsmen worked day and night to forge all kinds of weapons of war, followed by hundreds of thousands of craftsmen, and then millions of craftsmen. Every once in a while, a group of immortals and soldiers would leave the Spirit Cave, hurrying to various places in the East Sea to supervise the construction and expansion of cities and passes. Especially at the various important checkpoints, there were even military towns of astonishing scale built. These military towns were connected with teleportation formations. In order to prevent the teleportation formations from being isolated by someone with a void sealing spell, several dozens of backup teleportation formations were set up outside the towns, so that the reinforcements could be mobilized at any time. Batches of newly recruited soldiers kept being sent into the Spirit Cave, and batches of soldiers who had been brainwashed and were extremely loyal to Wu Qi kept walking out of the Spirit Cave. Even the weakest of these soldiers had a cultivation base equivalent to an 18th tier heaven immortal who specialized in body tempering. On top of that, their numbers were huge, and once they were gathered together, they would be a mighty army that could shake the world. However, these soldiers had all been secretly sent to various military camps, cities, and towns in the East Sea. Unless it was absolutely necessary, no one knew how many soldiers had been cultivated in the East Sea. Now, hundreds of billions of people had moved into the territories of the 30 provinces of the East Sea. According to the ratio of 100 people to 1 soldier, Wu Qi could build an army of 1 billion soldiers in a short time. This was also the most helpless thing for the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League to deal with Diyu. No power dared to fight a war of attrition with Diyu for a long time, and any power that dared to fight a war of attrition with Diyu, including the ancient gods, had been swept into the garbage heap of history, never to rise again. With the cultivation techniques of the human race and the huge population, if it were not for some objective conditions, Diyu's army would have long swept across outer heavenly realms like locusts, and even reached the gates of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League. As the East Sea accumulated its strength bit by bit, all kinds of armaments, such as flying ships, crossbows, arrows, sabers, spears, swords, halberds, armors, shields, and many others had been piled up like mountains in their warehouses. According to Wu Qi's highest order, the East Sea was preparing armaments on a scale of 10 billion people who had been killed or wounded in 10,000 years of war. Meanwhile, Liang Zhu was constantly transferring all kinds of armaments to the East Sea. As long as Wu Qi sent an official document to Liang Zhu, all the large armaments, talismans, and bone talismans he applied for would never be deducted. Meanwhile, the East Sea City, the heart of the East Sea, had been turned into a deadly city under MOD's design. It measured 1,000 miles in both width and length, and was surrounded by 36 city walls. The ground of the vast city was built with gold essences of 5 elements, and had the ability to hover in the air like Mo City. It was also equipped with countless mechanisms and powerful restrictive spells, including powerful formations such as the Cosmic Star Formation and the Fiend Slaying Sword Formation. MOD used all his ingenious ideas in the study of mechanisms on the construction of the East Sea City. In order to help MOD expand the city, Wu Qi even covered the entire East Sea City with Dark Een Celestial Tower at the cost of his blood essence, forcibly speeding up the flow of time in some parts of the East Sea City. When the East Sea City was finally expanded after 1,300 years, Wu Qi scanned the new East Sea City with his divine will and cursed under his breath, "Damn it." He was too lazy to express any opinion on this deadly city. Although many of the powerful machines in the city were made by him, Wu Qi really had no opinion on this freakish city. No one below the level of primordial immortal could get close to it, and it had the power to instantly kill any immortals and bodhisattvas below the peak level of gold immortal realm within 1,000 miles. This was the new East Sea City. Just as the East Sea City was preparing for a contingency, some bad signs finally began to appear. First, in a few ninth-grade provinces far to the east of Diyu, some refugees had raided the government offices and captured the few county cities in those provinces. Then, those refugees who came out of nowhere raised the banner of, "The human emperor is immoral," slaughtering the common people, changing the world and reorganizing the human race. When he received the official document sent directly from Liang Zhu, Wu Qi cursed reflexively. How could these refugees capture a county city? Even if it was a county city in a ninth-grade province, there were always 30 to 50 soldiers stationed there. Even the soldiers and oracles who had cultivated to the realm of nascent soul were not people that ordinary people could deal with, especially the refugees. Under Great Yu's strict control, how could there be any more refugees? Putting everything else aside, where did those refugees come from? If it was a natural disaster, the local government in Diyu was very efficient in providing disaster relief. Powerful soldiers were enough to deal with most natural disasters, abundant provisions were enough to settle any number of refugees, and powerful spells could definitely ensure that these refugees would have houses to live in, clothes to wear, and fields to farm in a short period of time. Diyu was a dynasty where it was impossible for refugees to rise. So, why would a county city be captured by refugees? Then more and more strange things happened. In a province in the northeast of Diyu, a phoenix landed on a hill, threw its head back and cried out, "The new emperor shall rise," 49 times before dying. In a province in the southwest of Diyu, a 9-colored divine dragon descended from the sky, carrying a stone tablet on its back with the words "You shall perish" engraved on it. A few days later, the main rivers of 3,988 large rivers in the west of Diyu burst into floods at the same time, destroying a large number of residential houses and making countless people homeless. Wherever the floods passed, a black turtle stood on top of a mountain, carrying a stone tablet on its back. The golden characters on the tablet shone with a dazzling light, and could be seen clearly by everyone in a radius of millions of miles. A line of golden characters read, "The birth of the sacred emperor, the abdication of the human emperor." About a month later, the barren land at the junction of the 3 provinces in the southeast suddenly caved in tens of thousands of miles deep. In the huge, dark pit, countless ghosts and monsters were screaming all day long, "Diyu is unruly, harming the people, the birth of the sacred emperor." Their shrill cries drifted in all directions day and night, and the farthest place even reached the border of Zhong province. Before the officials of Diyu could refill the sinkhole, tens of thousands of meteors fell from the sky. When they smashed into the ground, they exploded, and out of each came a strange ape with a white body, a black head, a red tail, and green claws. These monkeys hopped and ran like the wind, wandering all over Pangu continent. If they saw the people of Diyu, they would shout, "Do you know? Emperor Haozuan will die in less than 3 months. The birth of the sacred emperor will change the world. The birth of the sacred emperor will change the world." Or, when they ran into the local officials of Diyu, these monkeys, who ran so fast that ordinary Diyu generals could not catch up with them, would shout, "Aren't you going to save your own lives? Diyu is unruly, and the emperor's aura is crumbling. Diyu will be destroyed, and a new emperor will rise." Emperor Haozuan flew into a rage and sent a large number of powerful oracles to hunt down these monkeys. But no one knew what these monkeys were, as they could tear through the void and travel at will. Even though the supreme oracles of Diyu possessed mighty cultivation bases, none of them could kill even one monkey and offer it to Emperor Haozuan. Then, all kinds of ominous signs began to appear all over Pangu continent. There were rains of blood, landslides, corpses rising from graves and wounding people, and pregnant women giving birth to all kinds of miraculous babies. In some places, pregnant women gave birth at the same time on the same day. Clad in armors and armed with weapons, the babies hopped out of the door, saying that they were going to Liangzhu to kill the unruly emperor, Emperor Haozuan. For a moment, the people of Diyu were in a state of panic, and the people were in chaos. Right at this precarious moment, another urgent document was delivered into Wu Qi's hand. In outer heavenly realms, immortals began to organize conflicts with the marquises of Diyu. Thousands of marquises had been killed in the conflicts, and their generals and soldiers were either killed or captured. In just a few days, Diyu had lost control of a large area of outer heavenly realms. And this kind of friction was getting more and more intense. Chapter 859. Inside the heaven refining cauldron, Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu had fused into one, and under Wu Qi's guidance, they were making a breakthrough to the realm of Tao breaking. If Wu Qi were alone, he would have made the breakthrough easily. But to help Princess Zhonglu break through with him, Wu Qi would have to work 100 times harder. Fortunately, Princess Zhonglu cultivated the primordial Tao of divinity, which was different from immortals and Buddhas. There were no bottlenecks in her cultivation, and as long as she had enough talent and energy, she could break through. If it were a female immortal, it would not be so easy for Wu Qi to help her break through the realm of Tao breaking, even if he had to give up all his blood essence. Princess Zhonglu sat cross-legged on Wu Qi's body. Their bodies had turned into a hazy purple mist, and the primordial purple energy was flowing back and forth inside of them. A fiery purple-golden divine power had transformed into a huge vortex amidst the primordial purple energy, crazily devouring the natural energy in the surroundings. Almost all the natural energy in the spirit cave had been sucked away by them, and the others could no longer absorb any energy. Even though the pyramid was constantly drawing an enormous amount of natural energy from Liangzhu, it could not support their consumption. In a flurry, Ao Buzan and the others piled up a huge amount of immortal stones they had mined next to the heaven refining cauldron. But, no matter how many supreme-grade immortal stones they piled up, they were all sucked up in just a blink of an eye. Luo Lu and the others had left the spirit cave and gone to various spirit mountains and rivers in the East Sea to mine immortal stone veins for Wu Qi and Princess Zhonglu to use in their cultivation. With their cultivation bases as primordial immortals, Luo Lu and the others had collected all the immortal stones in all the energy veins within hundreds of thousands of miles with just a wave of their hands. Even though a dozen primordial immortals were desperately collecting immortal stones for Wu Qi, they still felt they could not make ends meet. Fortunately, Wu Qi still had a Yuan Ling's nether realm inside his body. When the spiritual energy of the outside world could no longer meet their needs, Wu Qi began to extract the original spiritual energy of the spiritual vein in Yuan Ling's nether realm. Yuan Ling's fresh air kept rushing into Wu Qi's body, and after his careful transformation, it gradually merged into Princess Zhongli's body. Princess Zhongli did not practice any body cultivation techniques, but under the nourishment of Yuan Ling's clear qi, her body became more and more flexible and strong. Along with a deep roar, the purple mist surrounding Wu Qi suddenly transformed into 99 Ganoderma-shaped clouds, wheeling ceaselessly around him. A beam of golden light with a slightly dark purple hue slowly emerged from the top of his head, transforming into a wheel of light that looked like the sun behind his head. Princess Zhongli's body trembled. The indestructible lotus, the cardinal tower, and the heart seal emerged at the same time, and the same beam of golden light with a slightly dark purple hue rose from the top of her head. Amidst it, 9 avatars of the ancient gods could be vaguely seen, emanating a suffocating, terrible divine pressure. Wu Qi slowly opened his eyes and clenched his fists. The flow of time controlled by the Dark Een Celestial Tower had quietly increased to 20,000 times its original speed. Wisps of purple mist shone from his eyes as he looked up into the sky. His chaotic divine eyes had evolved into the primal Dharma eyes. With just a glance, nothing under the heaven could escape his sight, unless it was blocked by an almighty expert with a cultivation base equal to his. Very good. A few of my old enemies are still alive. And they are very nourishing. With a flash of purple mist in his eyes, Wu Qi retracted all his aura. He and Princess Zhongli had broken through to the 6th tier of the Divine Gold Realm at the same time, which was the lowest tier of the Tao-breaking realm. At this level, even if the Great Tribulation of the Heavenly Tao came, they would not be powerless to fight back. The so-called Tao-breaking realm was the possibility of destroying the Heavenly Tao and transcending the shackles of the Heavenly Tao. Princess Zhongli opened her eyes as well. She bent down and kissed Wu Qi on the forehead, frowned, and said with a sigh, "But now, unless we can cultivate in seclusion in Yuxiong Plain, it will be a long time before we can break through to the next realm." The amount of magic power needed to break through to the 9th tier of the primordial realm was a frightening number. It was because Wu Qi had refined 2/3 of Kitagarb's magic power that he and Princess Zhongli could safely break through to the peak of the 1st tier of the primordial realm. Even though they did not encounter any bottlenecks in their cultivation base, the accumulation of magic power alone had troubled them for a long time. If Wu Qi had not extracted the essence of Yuan Ling's nether realm at all costs, and at the cost of nearly destroying Yuan Ling's nether realm, he could barely gather enough energy to transform into magic power for himself and Princess Zhongli to break through. Now, the essence of Yuan Ling's nether realm was almost gone. If he wanted to restore it to its original state, it would take at least hundreds of thousands of eons to replenish it, unless it could plunder a large number of energy veins from the outside world. He helped Princess Zhongli up, summoned a pool of clean water, and washed their bodies. After that, both of them changed into a new set of clothes. Wu Qi was wearing the robe of Diyu, while Princess Zhongli was wearing the robe of a supreme oracle. As he put on his clothes, shoes, socks, and a crown, Wu Qi chuckled and said, "It's already a blessing that we've broken through to the realm of Tao breaking in such a short time. It's not convenient for us to do it now. When the time comes, when the world is in chaos, we won't be able to slow down our breakthroughs." Just now, when he scanned the sky with his Dharma eyes, Wu Qi found the cave abodes of several old acquaintances in the sky above Pangu continent. Unlike Wu Qi, their cultivation bases were not as radical as his, but had been accumulated bit by their own hard work. Countless eons before Pangu created heaven and earth, these old fools had already existed, and after countless years of hard work, they had only reached the realm of Tao breaking, which was still some distance away from fusing with the Tao. Wu Qi and Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was so fast that they should not ask for more. Of course, with the scroll of stealing and the innate wisp of thievery energy, Wu Qi could break through to the peak level of Tao breaking in just a few hundred years if he dared to do anything reckless. But with the lesson of the white mouse, how could Wu Qi dare to do anything reckless? Although many of the people who killed the white mouse were now dead, some were still alive. Wu Qi swore that as long as he went around and scrupulously killing primordial immortals and divine gold immortals and stealing their cultivation bases like the white mouse, he would be hunted down by all the almighty experts in the universe in less than a year. Even Yu Xiong Plain was not a good place to go. It was one thing to crazily extract natural energy from the spirit cave under the East Sea, and it could be said that the East Sea had trained too many armies there. But if he went to Yu Xiong Plain to cultivate with all his might, once a Tao-breaking expert absorbed natural energy with all his might, it would cause the natural energy in the entire Yu Xiong Plain to change. Wu Qi did not want to be hunted down by De Yu's backers. If he was hunted down by the Yellow Emperor, Xianyuan, or the Yen Emperor, Shenong, he would not be able to fight back or scold them. That would be very unfair. Although he was a chaos fiend god in his previous life, Wu Qi was reincarnated as a human being in this life, and he really regarded himself as a descendant of the human race. After all, Yuan Ling had lived a boring life in his previous life, and as a human being in this life, Wu Qi had too many ties and concerns, so he could not help but care about them. Gently patting Princess Zhang Li's buttocks, Wu Qi breathed a long sigh and said, "Don't worry, don't worry. Just now, I saw those immortal officials and heavenly lords of the celestial court in outer heavenly realms setting up something very interesting. Chaos is coming, and as long as it does, we will have a chance to strike." Grinning coldly, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and said, "You and I don't have a bottleneck in our cultivation. It's just a problem of our magic power and cultivation base. When the time comes, we can capture as many primordial immortals of the celestial court, Buddhas of the Buddhist League, great heavenly ghost kings of the ghost realm, fiend emperors of the fiend realm, and demon emperors of the demon realm, and we'll take all their cultivation bases as our own. Even Mouse Bai could reach the peak level of Tao-breaking realm in just a few hundred years, so how could Wu Qi be weaker than him? In the past, the white mouse was all alone, and he had offended too many people because of his unscrupulous behavior. But now Wu Qi had so many people around him, so many friends and family, and his means had become more shrewd and treacherous. He would never make the same mistake as the white mouse. With a proud sneer, 18 figures rushed out of the top of Wu Qi's head. After being tempered by the heaven-refining cauldron, the impurities in his blood-draining celestial fiends' bodies had been completely removed. Therefore, in the eyes of others, they looked like immortals of great virtue. Each of them was shrouded in immortal energy and had the cultivation base of a first-tier primordial immortal. But it was a pity that Wu Qi's cultivation time was too short. Although these clones had strong cultivation bases, they lacked handy magical treasures. They did not even have a primordial immortal artifact, not to mention a supreme artifact of primal chaos or a spirit artifact of chaos. This had greatly reduced their overall strength. As long as he could make up for this shortcoming, Wu Qi was confident that he could slowly deal with those old fools. No matter what they want to do, how can they not give me some benefits? Wu Qi sneered. The heaven-refining cauldron turned into a beam of dim light and shot up into his forehead, turning into a faint shadow of a round cauldron that was imprinted on his forehead. The pyramid in the middle of the spirit cave was constantly spewing out a huge amount of natural energy. The natural energy that Wu Qi and Princess Zhang Lu had drained over the past 2 years was quickly restored, and the soldiers, immortals, and oracles of the East Sea had once again resumed their normal training. Lu Qingfeng and the other civil officials of the East Sea rushed up to Wu Qi and presented the documents they had accumulated over the past few days. Princess Zhangli took over all the documents and quickly read them, while Wu Qi clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the soldiers of the East Sea who were undergoing hellish training in the spirit cave with a smile on his face. What a delightful sight! So many heroes of the Warring States period were training these soldiers of the East Sea: Baiqi, Wang Jian, Meng Tian, Li Xen, Wei Liaozi, Li Mu, Lian Pe, Zhao Ke, Yu Yi, and many others. What a delightful sight! While the famous generals were training the soldiers, Guiguzi, Sun Quang, Mod, Su Qin, Zhang Yi, Li Si, Su Fu, and a few others were teaching the oracles of Dong Hai's Directorate of Celestials all kinds of cunning strategies. Wu Qi's ears twitched, and what Guiguzi and the others were teaching came into his ears immediately. After listening to a few sentences, Wu Qi felt his heart beating wildly. What a pity! Whether it was De Yu, the Celestial Court, or the Buddhist League, They all paid particular attention to fighting in a dignified manner, adhering to the rule that only the strongest would win. But what did Guiguzi and the others teach these oracles? Wu Qi could not help but sigh for those who would have to fight the army of the East Sea in the future. They would surely die a miserable and aggrieved death, wouldn't they? Wu Qi suddenly realized that it was absolutely wise of him to forcibly gather the people of the 6 dynasties together. Just then, Princess Zhang cried out in alarm. He quickly turned to look at the document in Princess Zhang Li's hand. 300 outer heavenly realms closest to Pangu continent are flying here at high speed. Chapter 860. In the starry sky outside Pangu continent, a small piece of space suddenly twisted, and in the next moment, Wu Qi and Princess Zhang appeared silently. The motionless lotus under their feet was slowly spinning. The faintly discernible motionless lotus was divided into 9 layers, with 360 petals forming a thick lotus throne. Wisps of chaotic aura enveloped them, isolating them from any possible probing methods from the outside world. Looking at Pangu continent from this place, the indescribably vast continent looked like a tiny speck the size of a needle tip. In the distance, a huge landmass called Far Heaven was flying towards Pangu continent, leaving a long, fiery tail behind it as it smashed through the debris in its way. The Far Heaven realm was a fragment of Pangu continent that was classified as an upper-tier heavenly realm among the outer heavenly realms. It was 3 million miles thick, and its surface area was the size of 4 Zhong provinces. An 18th-tier gold immortal heavenly lord, 36 heaven immortal officials, and thousands of itinerant immortal officials were stationed on it. Like the other heavenly realms under the control of the celestial court, there was an immortal city in Far Heaven for immortals and itinerant cultivators to trade and meet. At the same time, a marquis of the people, who was sent by Diu, was stationed there with 100,000 soldiers. Apart from the heaven lords, immortal officials stationed by the celestial court, and the 100,000 soldiers stationed by Diu, no one else could be stationed in Far Heaven. Far Heaven, where even the fairies did not have a branch, had accumulated an enormous amount of natural energy. The concentration of natural energy here was even comparable to some places on Pangu continent where the natural energy was thin. But at this moment, the vast Far Heaven of Dharma derivation was only left with a thin stream of spirit energy drifting back and forth. The spirit energy that had been accumulated for countless years had been gathered by some almighty immortal magic and transformed into a huge sun in the void. The sun replaced the original position of highest heaven, and the stars that had been revolving around highest heaven now revolved around the sun. Therefore, the positions of the stars in the universe did not change at all, and there was no possible catastrophic upheaval. 3 months ago, the protector of the Diyu of Far Heaven had a conflict with an itinerant immortal who was passing by, and his head was chopped off by that itinerant immortal. Diyu, a 6 stars Pangu Heaven general, was killed by an itinerant immortal passing by. It was a clumsy excuse, but it was what happened. Diyu's protector of the people was killed, and after that, the soldiers under his command clashed with some loose immortals and cultivators who were passing by. The army of 100,000 was either killed, fled, or disappeared. The army of Diyu, which was originally a deterrent force, collapsed just like that. After Great Yu's army was disintegrated, the Heaven's heavenly lord, who presided over Far Heaven, immediately opened up Far Heaven, which had little natural energy left, and tens of thousands of blessed caves on it. Then he recruited all the immortal sects in the vicinity of Far Heaven, allowing each of them to choose a cave abode and set up a Taoist rite temple. For countless years, only the heavenly lords and immortal officials sent by the celestial court could reside in Far Heaven. But now, the sky was filled with immortals and itinerant cultivators. There were 30 gold immortals, 1,000 heaven immortals, and hundreds of thousands of itinerant cultivators below the realm of nascent divinity. In addition to these itinerant immortals and itinerant cultivators who had entered Far Heaven, there were also mortal kingdoms controlled by immortal sects with countless mortals. Among the immortal sects in outer heavenly realms, Even the smallest one could control a planet with thin natural energy. There were more or less mortal kingdoms on each planet, and the people under their rule numbered in the billions. Now, the mortal kingdoms under the control of the immortal sex had also moved into far heaven, and at least half of the people from hundreds of planets of various sizes had moved in. Far heaven was nearly 4 times the size of Zhong province, which was more than enough to feed so many people. With so many immortals and mortals, far heaven was driven away from its original position by the immortals, flying toward Pangu continent at a speed close to that of a gold immortal. Along the way, far heaven was still accelerating, speeding toward Pangu continent. At this speed, it would take at most half a year to collide with Pangu continent. How could they let it collide with Pangu continent? Princess Zhonglu frowned. Her nose twitched slightly as she clasped her hands under her sleeves and said with a cold grin, "Are they trying to put far heaven and Pangu continent back together? These outer heavenly realms are part of Pangu continent, and the fragments of the same origin and nature will surely be absorbed and merged by Pangu continent very quickly. These immortals and mortals. Then, these immortals and mortals will be able to set up camp on Pangu continent," said Wu Qi with a cold grin. After calculating with his fingers, Wu Qi grinned coldly and said, "Even if great you can kill the people from these immortal sects, it can never touch these mortals. These mortals have been living in outer heavenly realms for generations. They are not the Yu's people, but the people of the celestial court." Princess Zhonglu narrowed her eyes and said, "If they send a large number of immortals and mortals from outer heavenly realms back to Pangu continent in this way, not to mention the immortals, but if there are pawns cultivated by the celestial court among those mortals, who are also practicing the cultivation techniques of the human race, they can unite all the mortal kingdoms sent to Pangu continent into one or a few powerful human dynasties." Wu Qi sighed and said, "Coupled with the natural and man-made disasters that have befallen Pangu continent recently, and those proverbs and rumors, these new human dynasties are the so-called dynasties founded by the reincarnation of the sacred emperor, and human Emperor Diyu is a fatuous ruler who should be overthrown. Perhaps the celestial court can strengthen its power again." Princess Zhonglu looked curiously at Wu Qi and asked with a smile, "The most the celestial court can do is to destroy Diyu with the hands of the human race. How can they strengthen their power?" Wu Qi gave a cold grin, then gritted his teeth and said, "Have you forgotten the list of investiture of the gods during the Shang dynasty?" Princess Zhongli's face flickered. Biting her fingernails, she pondered for a moment, then finally nodded slowly and said, "It is indeed a good plan. They will send all the generals and oracles who died in Diyu's war into the list of investiture of the gods. They will become the pawns of the celestial court, and must be controlled by the celestial court. In this way, the celestial court will become stronger and stronger, and Diyu will become weaker and weaker. In the end, the celestial court will replace Diyu and become the master of Pangu continent." Wu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "From then on, the mortals will be at the mercy of the immortals, and Pangu continent will become their backyard, where they can plunder all the spirit herbs and energy stones. With a continent like Pangu continent that can keep growing and expanding, even if the immortals face the apocalypse of heaven and earth in the future, the time will be greatly delayed, and there will be no more primordial immortals falling like rain when they face the apocalypse." Princess Zhonglu did not say a word, and Wu Qi, too, did not say a word for a long time as he watched far heaven fly past him at top speed. The Celestial Court and the Buddhist League had indeed found a good way to control the human race and Pangu continent once and for all. In order to achieve this, how much effort had they put in, and how much preparation had they made in advance? Perhaps the battle of investiture of the gods by King Zhou of Shang on Earth was just a preview of what would happen on Pangu continent today. God knew how many times such exercises had been carried out in the mortal worlds. Everything was for the ultimate control of the human race and Pangu continent. However, who was the one who came up with this plan? Was it those old fogies, the great celestial emperor of the celestial court, or the Lord Buddha of the Buddhist League? Based on Wu Qi's understanding of those old fogies, they only wanted their own safety, and they would not interfere in such things. But without their help, how could the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League dare to do such a thing at the risk of angering the Wahuang clan? Even the front door of the Wahuang clan was blocked by them. The mystery behind this was worth investigating. Moreover, Wu Qi suddenly realized that De Yu had given the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League too much leverage in the rebellion of Myriad Immortal Alliance. De Yu had killed too many immortals and itinerant cultivators, and even the sovereign of the Myriad Immortal Alliance, who was an important minister of the Celestial Court. After that, Prabhudaratna Buddha sneaked into Liangzhu and was killed by De Yu. The primordial immortal of the Celestial Court and the Buddha of the Buddhist League were killed by De Yu. This excuse was enough for those old fogies, who were shameless in Wu Qi's eyes, to negotiate with the Wahuang clan. Perhaps the result of the negotiation was that the Wahuang clan could no longer speak up for De Yu this time. In that case, the fact that I've killed 3 primordial immortals of the Celestial Court and 3 Buddhas of the Buddhist League has actually given them a better excuse. Wu Qi slapped himself on the forehead. The crown prince of the Celestial Court was still hanging outside the south gate of the East Sea City. These excuses were more than enough. Princess Zhongli had also figured out the mystery. She sighed with a little distress and said, "Could it be that the crown prince was thrown out to die?" Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and sneered. Look at Ing Zheng's attitude toward his empress. For those high and mighty emperors, the death of a few wives and sons is nothing. If necessary, I'm afraid that the great celestial emperor doesn't care how many sons he has. Princess Zhongli fell silent. She looked up at the sky and murmured in a low voice, "Don't provoke us in the East Sea, or else." Suddenly, a sheet of golden light flashed in front of far heaven, which had flown tens of millions of miles away. In the next moment, a troop of De Yu soldiers in golden helmets and armors appeared in front of it. A general of De Yu, whose cultivation base was at the peak of the 9 stars realm of the second Panga heaven, was riding on a single-horned qilin. With a mace in his hand, he pointed at far heaven and cried out, "This is the airspace of De Yu. Back off now or else." The enormous far heaven came crushing down silently. The general of De Yu roared furiously and rode away from the impact of the huge landmass, but the soldiers behind him howled miserably as they were smashed to pieces. Far heaven was one of the fragments of Pangu continent, which was transformed from the body of the great Saint Pangu. The generals and soldiers of De Yu who cultivated the cultivation techniques of the human race could destroy the stars in the void, but they could not destroy Pangu continent. Therefore, all 30,000 elite soldiers of De Yu were smashed to pieces by Far Heaven. Far Heaven did not stop, but continued to fly toward Pangu continent. The general of De Yu roared furiously. Waving his mace, he broke into Far Heaven. A Buddhist chant echoed out of the void as 7 bodhisattvas of the Buddhist League came to the general at the same time, waving their hands to unleash a great sheet of Buddhist light to freeze him in place. Almost at the same time, a flying sword shot out of the 10 blessed lands of Far Heaven, transforming into a beam of light that pierced the vital parts of the general's body. 7 bodhisattvas of the Buddhist League and at least 30 gold immortals of the Tao League struck at the same time, chopping the general into pieces without giving him any chance to fight back. Wu Qi sighed softly. He gave the rapidly flying Far Heaven a look and shook his head gently. "Zi Xian, let's go back and prepare for war." "He, the investiture of the gods? It's very interesting." Chapter 861. After returning to the East Sea City, Wu Qi gave up on cultivating and began to forge magical artifacts for those close to him. Flying swords, magical treasures, armors, immortal robes, and all kinds of magical artifacts were forged by Wu Qi with all kinds of rare materials. After all, the East Sea's foundation was too weak. Although Ao Buzan and Lord Xianxing had a chaotic spirit artifact with them, apart from that, they did not have a single defensive magical artifact. The immortal magic of the immortals and the Dharma of the Buddhist League all had all kinds of unimaginable offensive means. Apart from chaotic spirit artifacts such as the immovable lotus and the fundamental tower, Very few primordial immortal artifacts could withstand all kinds of magical attacks. Therefore, in order to survive the future battles, what was needed was not one or two defensive magical artifacts, but a whole set of them. Even with the power to accelerate time by 20,000 times, and even though he was a grandmaster of artifact refinement in his previous life, it was not easy for him to craft a set of satisfactory magical artifacts for everyone around him. He had to take into account the properties of everyone's magic power and fighting habits. It would take thousands or even hundreds of years to craft a good gold immortal artifact. Even if Wu Qi could divide the heaven refining cauldron into 180 cauldrons that specialized in crafting artifacts at the same time, he could only take care of the most important people around him. 180 cauldrons hovered in midair. Purple flames flickered quietly in them, and strange noises kept ringing out of them. Sitting cross-legged under the cauldrons, Wu Qi frowned and said to the people in front of him, "I can sense the presence of some old fools. They are very tricky and difficult to deal with. We can't be careless and we can't fight them head-on." After calculating for a while, Wu Qi smiled bitterly and said, "Unless we can have 10 Dao fusing experts and 100 Dao breaking experts in the East Sea, we won't be able to fight them head-on. These old things may not personally make a move, but you have to be careful of some of them who are very shameless. They will do things like bullying the young. Although they are shameless, for the sake of their reputation, they are used to sneak attacks from behind." Ao Buzen's expression was also very ugly. He first gestured a 7, then a 9. Wu Qi nodded his head, then made a gesture of 18 with his hand. Ao Buzen's face fell. He smiled bitterly and said, "Why are these old bastards still alive?" Wu Qi breathed out a sigh and did not say another word. Years ago, Yuan Ling had already stepped into the realm of Dao fusing, but he was beaten into transmigration by their joint attack, leaving only a speck of his true spirit. Back then, Mao Spai had stolen the blood essence and cultivation base of thousands of primordial experts and more than 100 Dao-breaking experts. In just a few hundred years, he had reached the peak level of Dao-breaking realm and was only one step away from fusing with the Dao. But in the end, he was also hunted down and killed. After thinking for a while, Wu Qi's current overall strength was far inferior to that of Yuan Ling and Mao Spai at that time. If he stood out, he would die a miserable death. Even if Wu Qi had reached the realm of Dao fusing, it was not necessarily safe. Wu Qi and Ao Buzen were aware of some of the things those people had done. The saying that those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will perish was not just an empty saying. The East Sea continued to strengthen its forces. Wu Qi had broken through to the realm of 6th-tier Dao breaking, and the time had been accelerated to 20,000 times. There was still half a year before Far Heaven came to Pangu continent, which meant Wu Qi and the others had 10,000 years to prepare. 10,000 years was not enough for the time being in terms of high-end fighting prowess, but the East Sea could accumulate countless middle and lower-level powers as backup. There were several times when Wu Qi almost thought of sneaking into outer heavenly realms and ambushing a few unlucky fellows to improve his overall strength. But now that the primordial experts were living in seclusion in the 9 heavens, and the Buddhas were sitting in Mount Vulture, the plan of the Celestial Court and the Buddhist League was in full swing. Countless people in the universe were scanning the surroundings with their Dharma eyes, and Wu Qi was not sure that he could hide from those people. Every time he thought of Mao Spai's notoriety and the terrible consequences if the scroll of stealing was exposed, Wu Qi forcibly suppressed the idea of taking the risk. Time went by, and finally the day came. Far Heaven was the first to approach Pangu continent. Holding Princess Zhang Li's hand, Wu Qi produced Dark Yin Celestial Tower, broke through the void, and hurried toward the place where Far Heaven was going to land. Suddenly, countless dark shadows came tearing through the void. Like Wu Qi, hundreds of supreme oracles had arrived, all of them hiding in the void with the help of the supreme towers. Waves of magic power were deliberately released, spreading out in the void. An unknown number of primordial experts of the Celestial Court and Buddhas of the Buddhist League were also hiding in the void. Their purpose in coming here was obvious. If the supreme priests dared to act blindly without thinking, these people would immediately take action. Not far from Wu Qi's old acquaintance, Yu Gu, was sitting cross-legged on the top of a supreme tower, sipping wine from a small wine cup in his hand. Sighing, he shook his head at Wu Qi and said, "There's no news from Sacred Emperor Xianyuan and Sacred Emperor Shenong, and the communication between Her Majesty Empress Hua and you has been completely cut off. The reaction of the 4 holy beasts and divine spirits who are on good terms with the human race is very strange. This time am in trouble." Sitting on the spire of Dark Een Celestial Tower, Wu Qi asked with a frown, "What does your majesty mean by this?" Yu Gu toyed with the small wine cup in his hand, his face extremely gloomy. He shook his head and said with a sigh, "What else can I mean?" While Wu Qi was pondering the meaning of Yu Gu's words, the sky suddenly lit up. A landmass the size of 4 Zhong provinces, wrapped in countless elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, was slowly descending toward Pangu continent. The place where far heaven was descending was a barren land directly west of Diu. It was surrounded by barren mountains, a primitive landscape that had just taken shape not long ago. As the huge landmass descended with a dull rumble, countless ferocious beasts in the barren mountains below fled for their lives. A deafening rumble rang out as far heaven collided with Pangu continent. Countless cracks, large and small, appeared on the land hundreds of millions of miles around because of the collision. The ground trembled violently, and one mountain after another was thrown into the sky by the tremendous force of the impact, then smashed back down again, shaking the ground like the surface of a drum. Earth energy rushed out of the cracks on Pangu continent, filling the surrounding void with a grayish hue. The place had become a mess, but for the entire Pangu continent, it was like a speck of dust had fallen on a football field. The people in Diu province, who were a little further away, did not feel any unusual changes at all. As soon as far heaven made contact with Pangu continent, the crowd could clearly see that it was like a drop of water falling into the ocean. Far heaven quickly dissolved and fused with Pangu continent. It all went smoothly without any stagnation at all. In just 6 hours, the huge landmass had fused with Pangu continent and became inseparable. There was no immortal magic or magic at work. It was Pangu continent that had voluntarily absorbed part of its body. When the shaking of the ground subsided a little and the cracks on Pangu continent healed, a deafening rumble rang out from under the ground. A column of yellow energy, 10,000 miles in diameter, fell from the sky, and suddenly the heavenly virtues descended, turning the world purple. An immortal of the celestial court flew out with a purple vase in his hand. As he hovered in midair, the vase emitted a bright light and absorbed all the yellow energy. Wu Qi and Yu Gu looked at each other, speechless. Like the supreme oracles around them, they quickly began to calculate with their fingers. As soon as they did, cold sweat broke out on their foreheads. These outer heavenly realms were all parts of Pangu continent that had been shattered by the previous apocalypses. Because of that, the once complete continent was no longer complete, giving off a feeling that the heavenly Tao was incomplete. Now that the celestial court had used this method to send these outer heavenly realms back to Pangu continent, it had satisfied Pangu continent's desire to complete itself. It was an act of virtues in line with the interests of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, as soon as far heaven merged with Pangu continent, the heavenly virtues immediately descended. And the amount of virtues was extremely shocking, almost comparable to killing 10,000 sovereign of the myriad immortal alliance or 100 Kitagarbha. Such an enormous amount of virtues. Wu Qi's face turned a little unsightly. Why did these immortals of the celestial court collect the virtues with treasures? For a moment, Wu Qi even thought of snatching it. But when he carefully sensed the few faint divine wills in the immortal, Wu Qi cautiously stopped. The attention of those existences that made Wu Qi so afraid was all focused on this virtue. If he made a move now, he would be courting death. With a faint sigh, Wu Qi patted Princess Zhang Li's little hand and whispered a few words to her. While Wu Qi was hesitating, the immortals and itinerant cultivators on far heaven, which had merged with Pangu continent, flew up into the sky and headed for the nearby spirit mountains and rivers, preparing to build their cave abodes there. Meanwhile, under the command of the officials of their respective dynasties, the billions of mortals on far heaven turned into a stream of people, bringing their families, furniture, and belongings with them as they excitedly set off for Pangu continent. Compared with the places where they used to live, Pangu continent was undoubtedly a legendary land of danger. The army of Dayu's Dingxi province, which was the closest to this place, hurried over in a flying ship. Dingxi province was just an ordinary 8th-grade province, with an army of only about 50,000 soldiers, and the strongest among them was only a general of the first-star realm of the second Panga heaven. Standing on the prow of the flying ship, the general roared in exasperation at the people who had invaded from outer heavenly realms. But, although he was roaring, the tens of billions of mortals had already turned into tens of thousands of troops of various sizes and were swarming in all directions. How could he care so much about that? The Dingxi general, who had flown into a rage out of humiliation, raised his right hand and was about to give the order to attack. However, when he looked closely at the ordinary citizens who had brought their families, the elderly, and the young along with them, and at the same time, were so excited that their faces were flushed from coming to the immortal realm, he was unable to give the order to attack. When had the Yu's army ever attacked ordinary people? Although these people were from outer heavenly realms, they were the same as the people on Pangu continent, the human race. The general was drenched in sweat. Trembling, he looked at the people who were migrating across Pangu continent, and suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. He could not do it, could not stop them, and could do nothing about it. The general threw his head back and hissed furiously. Then he pointed a finger at a group of immortals who were flying toward a mountain and snapped, and the small army of Dingxi province immediately piloted 10 flying ships and attacked the group of immortals from immortal sections. Suddenly, a loud roar came from below. The fatuous ruler is tyrannical, and the sacred emperor shall be established. Boys, more than 1 million soldiers who had also practiced the cultivation techniques of the human race soared into the sky and attacked the army of Dingxi province. Wu Qi shook his head. Dayu was in big trouble. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.